This message was delivered by Dr. Greg L. Bonson, scholar in residence at the Southern California Center for Christian Studies in Irvine, California.
Begin by discussing the development of a worldview. The development of a worldview. Or, to put it another way, what is philosophy all about? A lot of people are intimidated when they hear the word philosophy because, well, philosophers sometimes sound so academic and abstract that they at least like to give the impression that they're intellectual, and they use a vocabulary that can be intimidating, and so people are often put off by philosophy. In fact, you say, now we're going to study the philosophy of this or that. Most people just kind of, they click off upstairs. They say, well, that's the end of it for me. I'm not into philosophy. I'm not abstract and so forth. And as long as that is your conception of philosophy, or that's your attitude and your response to philosophy, it's doubtful that you'll be effective as a defender of the faith. Because the defense of the faith requires you to be basically a better philosopher than the unbeliever. Now, does that mean you have to stop everything and go back to school and get a philosophy major? No, by no means. But if you don't stop to think philosophically about what's going on in the dispute between the believer and the unbeliever, I think no hope as an apologist. If you refuse to think philosophically, you just run into people who are always dumber than you. But if you study philosophy, you'll be able to talk to anybody, provide an answer from the faith to anybody who asks you. That doesn't mean you're going to be able to keep up with a PhD in philosophy in terms of vocabulary and all that. But if you know what the issues are and what you're looking to accomplish, all you have to do is go slow and say, please explain that to me, explain that to me. And you'll be able to stay the conversation and not be worried that he's sandbagged.
This message is a continuation.
Epistemological questions that are part of everybody's worldview. What is the nature of truth? And what is the nature of objectivity? Is all truth subjective truth? Something that's part of the subject, part of the subject's desires or way of seeing? Or is truth something that's public and outside the subject, and therefore true for everybody? The logical question is, what's the nature of belief? What is it to believe something? And then what is it to know something rather than to just believe it? What's the difference between belief and knowledge? One of the key epistemological questions is, what are our standards for justifying beliefs? And what procedures should we follow to justify them? What are our standards and our procedures for justifying beliefs? Epistemology deals with science, the nature of science, discovery. Once again, it should be obvious that as Christians, our theology gives us some kind of because our theology
We are just super Christians. God's not done making us all alive in Him just yet. We all have foggy brains because that is operating in us. Because we are dying, because we are still mortal. But the promise of the scripture is that all will be made to live. All will be made to live. Really life in Christ.
Really live.
Really live in Christ.
All will be made to live, really live in Christ.
Corinthians 15:22. I'm telling you, when in that day, when death itself is abolished, all will be made to live. And no one will have a foggy brain in that day. What a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Death is reporting of him no longer. Romans 6:9. Having
particular approach to ethics. It may not be consistent, it may not be well thought out, but everybody has some basic idea of the nature of good and evil. And if I can, again, speculate for a moment, I'd say in our culture, all of us have some notion that good is that which is fair to everybody. Maybe it is the case that good is fair to everybody, maybe it isn't the case, but that is a pervasive cultural zeitgeist right now. Zeitgeist, spirit of the age, okay? And our way of looking at things, our pervasive mindset as a culture, says that good is what's fair to everybody. Well, if you don't hold that, well, it's more than just that, but that and other things are embraced in what I'm getting at when we say there's a fundamental view of the nature of good and evil. Our ethic involves a standard of morality. It involves a view of guilt, atonement, and personal peace. And everybody's got to have some view of that, because everybody deals with guilt. And everybody has to have some notion of personal peace, its value, and how it's achieved. It would be a fascinating study, maybe a nice Sunday school class for you sometime, just to go through the various views of personal peace in our world today. What is the nature of personal peace and how do we gain it? Does personal peace come when I get the most toys, and I'm on top of the heap, and I can set myself apart from everybody else? Or does personal peace come when I'm at one with everybody? Well, those are radically different views of personal peace, aren't they? And how do you gain personal peace if you feel guilty? A lot of people take drugs. Some people take drugs, obviously, for the thrill of it. Some people take drugs because they want to be dulled. Anyway, everyone has some view of personal peace, atonement, and guilt. And more generally, everyone has some view of social order, how we should relate to one another in society, what's the nature of society, and then taking it a step further, how should authority be exercised in society? What's the nature of the state? Our ethical outlook involves questions about how we attain and how we produce moral character. Okay, so if you're not a patient person, how should you attain patience? How can you produce a redemption? So, everyone has a worldview, and everyone's worldview, not necessarily this world like? What's man like? What's God like? What's real? The nature of knowledge, how we know what we know, and everyone's worldview addresses how we should live our lives. Metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Now, I said I wanted to do this 2 times, twice. That's an attempt to organize things according to category. Now I'm going to give you a list of philosophical questions that has historically developed. In fact, I'm going back to the origins of philosophy in the Greek world and give you a summary of the sorts of things that originally philosophers were mystified by and they argued over. And there's a method to this madness. Because I want you to see that the questions that I'm giving you from the very beginning days of philosophy turn out to be the very questions that we're struggling with today. Which leads some people to say, philosophy, what a waste of time. These guys don't make any progress. Well, these are the enduring, if not endearing, enduring questions of human life. Some people go home and they just want a beer and turn on the TV, but to one degree or another, everybody is going to ask philosophical questions. And if you think systematically and long about them, you'll find that those who are reputed to be the philosophers have pretty much caught on to what are the central issues. I mean, I can make fun of philosophers as well as any lawyer can make fun of lawyers. But in the end, the reason I've given a good portion of my life studying is because I really think it's important. Philosophers can act like real jackasses, no doubt about it. But what they're working with is critical. And so you should have some respect for the enduring questions. Why are they still there? What is philosophy? Philosophy is the desire to find explanations. How do things happen? Why do things happen? The baby in the crib is a very, 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 very low-level philosopher. The child going to elementary school is a little bit more of a philosopher. The child learning about science, the child going to college, organizing things in a disciplined way, these explanations are developing. But ultimately, the most abstract and general questions about how we know what we know, what the nature of reality is, and so forth, those are the philosophical questions. And so philosophy began many, many, many years ago with the desire to find explanations. How do we justify those explanations? When I explain this happened because of that, this event was caused by that, what are the methods or the standards by which I justify that comment? What method should I use? What standard should I use to justify my explanation? And then, in this desire to find explanations, how do I resolve internal conflict in my explanations? How do I resolve internal conflicts in my explanations? I'll stick with the illustrations I've already used. Hopefully they sink in. Why is it I say man is a physical entity, part of the physical world, but my explanation of man's behavior is not governed by the same laws by which I explain an apple falling from a tree? Why do I explain man's behavior by reference to creativity and freedom and responsibility, but I explain other things in the physical world in terms of the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, and what have you? The philosopher desires to find explanations, but explanations that are, one, justified, and two, the internal conflicts have been resolved. The early Greeks struggled with that. Next question. How are we to understand nature? How are we to understand matter and motion? What is the stuff of which the world is made? I know that sounds funny to put it that way, but I don't think there's any more basic way of saying it. What is the world made of? What is this stuff? And how is it possible that it changes? Is there one basic stuff of which everything is made? Say they said yes. If there wasn't one basic stuff, we wouldn't have an ultimately rational explanation for the world. And so everything's got to basically do the same thing. Water. But then the problem is, well, if everything's water, why do some things look different than other things? Why do some things seem more like water than other things? And so now he has to have an explanation of change, right? How the one becomes a many. How does the central stuff, the one rational unifying factor of reality, become the diverse things that we experience in our day-to-day lives? Why is there sand? Why are there rocks? Why are there plums and pumpkins if everything's water? Other people come along and say, well, your explanation of change isn't really helpful. Maybe this world's not made up of the same basic one kind of thing, the one stuff. Maybe it's made up of four kinds of things. Maybe it's earth, air, fire, and water. Well, you know, that really improves the richness and the ability to provide explanations. Now you've got four factors that you can use. But of course, that has been purchased at quite a price. And the price is, how do you unify the four? Now the world seems to be all diverse. And so then someone says, oh, how about this? Why don't we say, instead of four factors that are all different in character, that the world's made up of things that are all the same character, but there's an infinite number of them. We'll call them atoms, those things of which there is no smaller. They're the undivided. They're the indivisible or uncuttable elements. But the atoms are not made up of different qualities. They all have the same quality. And so we have now a rational unity. Everything is the same quality, but we also have room for motion and change because there's an infinite number of them that can be repackaged and reorganized. Well, that seems like an improvement until you say, well, then how do you get a rational understanding of how things change? And then there are those who say, well, all the atoms fall through space and they don't ever change. Everything is determined.
Far I know about Orthodox. As far as Orthodoxy goes, you got to remember the
Well,
first couple centuries
I'm sorry,
of
William.
Christianity.
William, you know, Seth and I were both Christians, right?
Jesus hadn't taught. If you Google, and they're writing all these books about how Jesus would never judge gay.
Okay, welcome. So let's see what we have here. Re-exam visiting Matt Dillahunty at the 116 mark.
That's probably pretty good. Alex has a history of anti-trans stuff. All right. Patrick is calling from Illinois. Patrick's pronouns are he, him, says the Christian God is the best description for morality and epistemic normativity. Hey, Patrick, you're on with Matt and Seth. How are you?
Hey, I think my original thing wasn't description, but explanation. Thanks for having me on the show. So would we agree that universally humans ought to believe what is true and ought not believe what is false? I saw your talk with allegedly Ian,
Wow,
so I know you're somewhat of a moral realist.
I give up, Seth. I got a single syllable out before I was interrupted. So
Well, you saw
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify with allegedly
what?
Ian. That's all. I'm sorry.
You're throwing in a little context. You saw a talk that Matt gave?
Yeah, with allegedly Ian, and I saw that he was leaning towards moral realism. Matt, I did not mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify and give context for everybody if you wanted to fill in where you're at with moral realism.
Yeah, Matt got fussy because he was trying to add in why he was asking that question. It was based on a prior discussion. Right. Yeah, he's triggered because this is a question that's going to basically collapse his position. He's not sure if you ought to follow the truth. And if he makes that claim, then, well, he has no epistemic justification. He just feels that way right now.
I'm getting ready to do a new video, and it's not necessarily moral realism. It's an objective foundation that goes beyond what I used to have before. But no, I don't necessarily think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference. And
hey, how you doing, Reexam?
Hey, I'm doing good. I appreciate it. I know sometimes I come on and be like, hey, look what I do, but I definitely, want critique because, man's not an island,
No, it's totally cool. I mean, I don't usually get people that go and talk to Matt Dillahunty, so props for that. That's great. No worries.
Right. I was talking to his mute button more than him, but yeah.
How long is the exchange here?
Oh, not super long. They go on diatribes after that. I would guess maybe in the realm of 5 minutes, maybe between 5 and 10, somewhere in that, because a lot of them is just like, first they undermine everything they're going to say in the future, and then they morally grandstand, pearl clutch, and sanctimonious flourish, and then they do it again. Here's what they do. Just to give a preview, they take from the Bible instances where God uses some of the most severe judgments you could possibly imagine. And I try and explain primary and secondary causation. They want to cast too wide a net in the yes or no of whether or not, well, did God implement grape as a way to punish in the case of David's wives with Absalom? And the answer is that was the punishment God used. And then they will get and say, well, is it ever justified? And that's just a category error, because transcendentally, God can do whatever he wants with whatever he owns. You see this in the book of Job. God brings up Job to Satan, for example. Or God says, who will be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets in 2 Kings. And then, in Habakkuk 3:5, it talks about how where God goes, he brings both pestilence and all these other things, right? So, I mean, God, I think, again, you can even lock this into Revelation 13:8, where it says that Jesus is the Lamb who was slain before the foundation of the world. That one verse does a ton of theological work, and so I just bake it all in the cake. It's all baked in the cake already. Romans 9, my gosh. I mean, so they're hitting me up on being consistent, but they're horrified at my consistency, and they call it cold and psychopathic. And I'm just like, well, what's the alternative? Being embarrassed about God's absolute power and authority to do as he will with vessels of honor and vessels of dishonor? What can I justify my emotions against God for what he does with what belongs to him?
Right. So what it's coming down to is they try to do an internal critique. Right? They try to use the scriptures and say, oh, well, there's inconsistencies in what you say we ought to do and what God does. And what gets interesting is when you challenge their epistemic justification and still their moral framework, because you can grant them internal critique, and there can be what seems to be an obvious contradiction, but then they can't finish the job because you then ask them the moral question of why contradictions are wrong in their worldview. And they can't actually give you a concrete answer. It's going to be an opinion. It's a subjective answer. So they have to borrow from your worldview to say, well, it seems contradictions are wrong in your worldview, and it seems there's a contradiction there. So you ought not to adhere to that. But they can't do it without the borrow, and they can't do it from their own worldview. So it becomes very interesting. I don't know if that made sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, all that makes sense. I think it's harder because people's intuitions are so inescapably a contradiction cannot be, that it feels universal across all worldviews and equally justified within every worldview that is anyway, on first blush, not a self-contradiction or something. But so that's a very hard case to make to a wide audience, even though it's true. Even I haven't really thought out, like, I've heard Bonson say, how do you, and even Sai say, how do you account for contradictions in your worldview? It just, you have to get really in the weeds, more in the weeds than most people are prepared to do in an afternoon of their life to even
True.
explain how contradictions are only contextualizable, if you will, in the Christian worldview as a coherent objection to something that cannot be and can be at the same time. Obviously, we have the Islamic dilemma for Islam. We have the disparity between having multiple gods in polytheistic religions, and finding where a grounding of truth would hold all of those gods in one unified reality. We have all those things, but those have to be explored. Those have to be deviated to from a topic like atheism, where in atheism, they just take rationality for granted. They grant themselves the epistemic grounding to have a fixed point by which to determine probabilities or determine the certainty, even the certainty that they deny exists in their own worldview, that they use a grounding to deny their certainty.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because they always want to make themselves neutral in a sense, or not responsible for an ethical claim ultimately. And you can't do that when you're arguing with somebody. Like, whatever you're bringing to the table versus whatever they have, there's got to be that ethical thrust to it, right? That's part of the assessment. It's part of the worldview. You can't divorce that. So what they want to do is say, no, I'm just doing an internal critique. So this gets them to grant themselves the availability to point out contradictions are wrong. But like you're saying, if you want to go into the deeper conversation, which I would say is, I absolutely would, because it would be relevant. Like, they can point out, if they borrow from my worldview and borrow my ethical stance, that it seems I have a contradiction, and try to get me to agree to that. So I could even agree to it and say, wow, that looks like a contradiction. Now, all you need to do to finish this is, as the person pointing out the contradiction, show me why that's wrong from your purview. But they can't do that. So it's just the same game of, this guy has some doubt that he wants to bring into my worldview. That's all he's really doing. He's trying to sell me his doubt, but I'm pointing out he can't finish the conversation because of his lack of philosophical understanding or having a coherent position. So
one of the best questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were done.
You're saying you're right. It becomes a different conversation that's not for everybody, but it's completely relevant. Go ahead.
No, it's my fault. Even on this call, I'm too jumpy. I'm very energetic when it comes to this kind of conversation. But what I was going to say was, if they have a problem based on one area of knowledge or existence, I remember Bonson, when he talked about the abstract relating to the concrete, he would say, well, what's the relationship between ideals and the material world? One is, not subject to physics and timeless and spaceless, and the other is subject to time and space and, is not universal. Those are particular, right? And so you can use that question with any objection. What does contradiction relate to in the physical world? Even though conceptually we can say that it is in the minds of people that it's bad or good or whatever, how does that actually relate in a way that binds me that I ought to agree with you? What about the reality around us has deputized us to pull me over, so to speak, and charge me with some kind of thought crime or some kind of way that is a correctional measure that ought to change my thinking?
Right. Right. You're looking for the obligation, the ought, the duty in the worldview, which the Christian worldview has that. The secular worldview is bereft of that, right? So they want to impose that on you. Say, well, look, you're supposed to follow these obligations in your worldview, and you can say, you can handle that different ways. So say, well, I know that, but I'm talking to an unbeliever. I want to know how you unify what you're pointing out here, like the metaphysic and the ethic and the epistemic justification. You seem to be breaking things apart, jumping into my worldview, trying to critique it, then jump back and try to get me to buy it. But you can't actually make the case. You're trying to grant yourself forward and getting me to buy it from you without finishing it. So it's basically a game. I don't know if they actually realize that they're playing that game. I suspect some of them do.
Well, as we go forward and I split the prescriptive from the descriptive, they have a moment of silence. It's I don't know, it's kind of interesting because I would have figured somebody would have pointed this out to them before. All it really boils down to in its simplest form is the is-ought gap reapplied to atheist inquiry.
Yeah. Yeah, they're never going to solve that gap. They want to just ignore it.
I don't know how to justify that as an ought. I really think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference, and I don't know how to justify.
When he said, I do agree that it is a preference, who's he agreeing with right there?
With himself, I guess.
Yeah, it's just a strange move.
Well, here's what I think. Here's what I think happened. Because when I initially answered the question, he took a pause. Because he's not a dumb guy. No one's accusing him of being a dumb guy. He knows his stuff. He knows his stuff to know very well that what I'm asking is not a foolish question. It's a legitimate question because Hume still has sway in atheism for the is-ought gap, which you can't have a gap between two things that don't exist. So the is exists and the ought exists, even if only in theory in the atheist worldview. And so he has to deal with it. But the problem is, once he removes the ought entirely as a binding thing and it's a preference, he has removed all justification to have any moral outrage at the preferences of others, regardless of what those preferences are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a key component, exactly.
By that as an ought is don't necessarily think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference, and I don't know how to justify that as an ought.
I mean, really, that's just that right. What happened right there is just a completely devastating statement. Like
I know.
He just destroyed himself, and he did it, like cleanly, like, oh, this is a problem that we all have, type of thing, and it's not a problem for the Christian worldview. So
no, it's only a problem if you have an impersonal basis for reality, which cannot account for forgiveness, justice, answerability, any of this stuff, relationships, standing. Yeah. Oh my gosh,
well, that's great though. I love how a lot of the times the devastation happens in a way that people don't even catch, because that really did just happen right there. And most people would just gloss over this, including believers. So I'm going to listen to it again here.
Text for everybody if you wanted to fill in where you're at with moral realism.
I'm getting ready to do a new video, and it's not necessarily moral realism. It's an objective foundation that goes beyond what I used to have before. But no, I don't necessarily think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference, and I don't know how to justify that as an ought.
Man, nice one. That's gold, man.
I know. Well, here's the thing. I usually don't. I know how it works in YouTube world. You take somebody's still shot where they're making a stupid face. You make that your thumbnail and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I don't know if Christ would want me to do that. I don't think Christ would want me to do that, to misrepresent. However, I titled the short that encapsulates this as Matt Dillahunty wrecks his career with reexamination, because it's true if you actually apply it, what he just said. Like right. It's not even sensational. It's just true. It's not even unfair or stilted. It's just true.
Yes, great point, because so many people are looking for like a dramatic moment, something that is just, oh wow, look, he just bam, he just laid. This is just very subtle and very devastating at the same time, and that shows the difference between someone who's really cued in to what's happening. It's a lot of the destruction and devastation happens in the subtleties that people don't even pick up. And that's a great example of one of them. Like I saw that short and I'm thinking like, most people are not going to see that except if they're really, really clued into what's happening there. They're going to be waiting for Matt to get excited and get upset, and that doesn't even happen. He just basically admits defeat in this conversation and across the board in what he just said there.
Past, present, and future.
Yeah. So that's great job on asking about
that goes beyond what I used to have before. But no, I don't necessarily think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference, and I don't know how to justify that as an ought.
Great.
Help me
So
understand
there
real
would be
fast,
no
both of you. Is the word ought thrown out as kind of a tripwire?
Why would it be a tripwire?
It's an imperative.
Yeah, well, right. You got to frame it as like a trap, something that you're doing illegally, which is another sort of. He's going into another moral.
Exactly. There's no sense of irony. Isn't this an unfair question in which you ought to ask fair questions instead? Aren't I a victim in here? In which in your case, you're the offender. I mean, the entire framework relies upon objective moral grounding that is mutually binding. It's unbelievable.
It's great because when you focus on it like you are, it's just everywhere. It becomes too easy. A task of like you remaining calm, you having to teach people and point out these little things over and over because they've been skating on this grant. They've been granting themselves for who knows how long, the ought, and someone just stops and says, no, let's challenge the meta ethic here. They're over and over going to call sense tripwires or whatever he's trying to frame this.
Yes.
It's an imperative.
Both of you. Is the word ought thrown out as kind of a tripwire?
It's an imperative, yes.
It's an imperative. Yeah, like we ought, for example, so we would be doing what we ought not do if we say, I don't want to believe that truth. I want to believe a comforting lie. So I'm going to go back to my cult, or I'm going to blast my brains out with drugs, or any number of things. Like if we, like for example, if you say I got deconstructed or I got deconverted out of my religion because the evidence brought me out of that, then what that means is there is a prescription from truth itself that dictates the actions of people, what they ought to do and how they ought to think. That truth itself is prescriptive, absent of anybody's preferences.
Is it prescriptive or can it be descriptive?
Well, if it's descriptive, then it doesn't have an actual prescription. But for example, I could say that humans have X behavior that is, communal, but that's just a description of their behavior. That doesn't necessarily prescribe anything any more than 2 + 2 = 4, or like what the atomic number for lead is.
I'm sorry. I interjected.
There's look, I thought we made up morals. What do we do now?
That's the thing. No, they don't. They jump into the Bible right after this, but this is pretty much the chess move that corners them.
Yeah, that's great.
I know everything after this is a performative contradiction of the things that they can't deny, which they don't speak because there is really nothing left. So they have to go back to the Bible, and they can't pound the facts. They can't pound the law. So the rest of it is just them pounding the table. And we can go through it if you want. And I'm kind of glad I went through it and bit the bullet instead of just resisting too much. Because I said primary and secondary causation so many times in terms of like the uses of sin of individuals as judgment by God to do certain things. I use that as a way to talk about primary and secondary causation, which, as I point out in my video, is also a problem for the atheist. In summary, it's basically like, if you're on trial, can you tell the judge, well, judge, it wasn't me. There's no such thing as the self or individuality. I'm just a cluster of molecules in a series of dominoes that went back to an explosion in the universe. And so you can't really blame me because I have causality and that causality has causality. And, aren't we all just kind of like floating around here? The judge will just throw you in jail because the judge intuitively recognizes that you are an individual. You have rational cognition, you have moral agency, and you chose to do whatever you chose to do, regardless of dependent priors and regardless of whatever degree of free will you subscribe to in your mind. So they have the problem too. I'm calling it a problem. I think it's actually resolved with God, because you actually have a spirit realm, number one, because God is spirit, and then number two, you would also have spirits in the individuals which exist independently of the physical realm. So you're not a puppet of the physics around you. You're an actual individual which has a mind independent of what the physics say, which otherwise you can't have rationality without that distinction.
Yeah, an evaluation process independent of the physical things happening. It can't be the same thing, or it's a false distinction of some sort, or an illusion.
Briefly, go ahead.
Are you saying Matt or me?
I figured Matt was going, but
Let's see that again.
Lead is.
I'm sorry. I interjected briefly. Go ahead.
Are you saying Matt or me?
I figured Matt was going, but
real quick. I think Seth.
What are you calling about?
I was gonna say, I think Seth realized that he gave me a goal, and then I just put it in the goal. I just put the ball in the goal, and then Matt was kind of upset because now, because of Seth, Matt is in a rough spot, and then so Matt has to ask me to reframe the entire conversation for him.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about? What did you call about? So
I could have been like, "Oh, that's it. Got what I wanted." But I didn't do that. I wanted to see how much he would let me get away with, and from this point onward, he doesn't let me get away with much in terms of like having any oxygen. But yeah.
But he's going to move into just an internal critique and assume the odd, right? He's just going to do more odd assumptions with you that go in the Bible.
Yeah, I was hoping to get into the forgiveness justice dilemma, that if justice exists, then it's moral realism, and if forgiveness exists, then it's moral realism that is dependent upon a will. So if forgiveness exists, forgiveness requires cognition and the choice in order to absorb the cost and mercy, which is forgiveness, or to use justice, which would be justified. And those are two available choices. And the available choice of mercy through forgiveness is only possible in the Christian worldview without a violation of justice, because Jesus takes our punishment, whereas in other theistic worldviews, there is no double imputation of our sins to God, the Son, and God the Son's righteousness from him to us in order to reconcile us, justify us, and bring us in right relationship with God. You don't have that in any other belief system.
Yeah, that's right. The revelation of Christ is key. Now, what is a moral realist more other than just a moral subjectivist of some fashion, trying to say that they identify something objective, but they don't have any way of actually identifying it? Am I reading that right? As far as moral realism, the problem with it?
Well, they need a relational justification between the humans and then what the humans are subject to in order to unify them to a standard that they can either meet or fail from.
Right.
And absent of whether punishment happens or not. But how they do that without a personal basis is beyond me. Well, they'll just say it's a brute fact. And there's an Orthodox Christian named Steelborn who pointed out to me a dilemma. He said, okay, do you have a method for identifying brute facts? If you don't, then you're claiming a brute fact as arbitrary. And if you do have a method for identifying brute facts, then you have a system, which means that there are priors before the brute fact, which would eliminate it as a brute fact itself.
Yeah. So that explanation there is showing that the moral realist is just smoke and mirrors. They're choosing a term and saying, "Oh, I'm a moral realist," but behind it there is nothing. There's no unifying factor, as you just pointed out. It's a complete smokescreen. So Matt is apparently moving in that direction, and he's moving into a smokescreen.
Well, I hope he has fun making his video he talked about, because I'm planning on responding to it, because I don't know how you can, all I have to do is just clip the time he said that he can't say that you ought to think true thoughts, you ought to adhere with the truth, and then just clip it after every single statement in his new video on morals based on an objective sort. Now remember, he differentiates moral realism from what he actually does, which is having an objective source for morals. So all he does is moral map on top of objectively observable phenomena, which doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's arbitrary. He's going to be pointing to brute facts as though he's an authority, and it's going to be dogmatic. That's another prompt you can use. Say, is there any dogmatic view in this position of moral realism? And they're likely to say no. And then when you get into brute facts, the arbitrariness or the axiomatic account for these facts, it's just going to be dogma, like unchallenged dogma that they set at the base of their worldview and say, well, that is the thing, that is the fact, and that can't be challenged. But it absolutely can from our worldview, and pointed out as arbitrary. So yeah, they're just going into what they think a more complicated view, and it's a more complicated deception is all it is. If you want to call it complicated, it is what it is. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what he tries to do with that. I don't think there's a way out. I think he should retire.
Yeah. So if we ought to believe that, if the answer is no to the question, ought we believe what is true and ought we reject that which is false, then truth and falsity in terms of what people believe are of equal value, and there's no tiebreaker between true or false belief. There's just preferences. And therefore, deconversion, what it does is it moral maps on the reality around us.
No, you're right in saying they're equal value. He just wants to establish a value to one over the other. But the equal value is actually like more of a negation. There's no value in either of them other than a personal preference, right?
Correct. I just want part of the optics of saying equal value is the cognitive dissonance that will register in people's minds when they say no, they're not. Just like Matt. Matt is giving the knee-jerk reaction that is true, but he cannot maintain his knee-jerk reaction that reflects truth and his stated position, which his show is based on.
Yes. Yeah, good point.
Is it to draw away from one conclusion necessarily, and truth and falsity in terms of what people believe are of equal value, and there's no tiebreaker between true or false belief. There's just preferences. And therefore, deconversion, what it does is it moral maps on the reality around us and uses it to draw away from one conclusion necessarily and draw towards another conclusion necessarily.
The fact that you can't justify believing true things and not believing false things as an actual imperative doesn't mean they're of equal value.
He can't finish that. He can't bring that to light, what he just said. He's just asserting this as though it's true, and you can completely challenge that.
How can you have value without ought? Like, how can you make a value claim or a value assessment without either presupposing it or arriving at it through rationality? If you presuppose it on your own and you're lonesome, it's arbitrary, and then it has no. It proves my point that it has no viability against the contrary. And then if you're using reason and your reason is sound and valid and everything, then it is true that the world outside of you and the reality outside of you, which you're contingent on, does already have a moral mapping that exists prior to your understanding of it. There's no way out of this.
Right. So yeah, he's stuck right there. Like, he didn't listen to anything you said after you said equal value. He just was like, nope. And he's agitated. So it's good that you didn't go too far, because he didn't get past anything. But yeah, let's listen to this.
Between true or false belief, there's just preferences. And therefore, deconversion, what it does is it moral maps on the reality around us and uses it to draw away from one conclusion necessarily and draw towards another conclusion necessarily.
The fact that you can't justify believing true things and not believing false things as an actual imperative doesn't mean they're of equal value. So
I can't justify the very thing that I'm claiming. but it doesn't mean I can't try anyway. Is that what he's saying?
I guess. I mean, it's
I
totally
can't justify this, but will you buy it?
I'm trying to figure out what isn't self-defeating about this episode.
Yeah, that's the short. Yeah, that's the short route, I think. Or is that the long route?
I don't know.
So,
it feels long, but it's done in a short order.
no,
I guess.
there's so much there. He's like I'm trying to read maybe on the screen that the fact I can't justify. He's trying to say, the fact I can't justify my claim believing true things doesn't mean they're of equal value. It's like he framed it in a way where he destructed himself or tried to just throw out epistemic justification. That's what they're constantly doing, right? They're constantly in error of all three categories: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, or one or two of them. They're always divorcing them and compartmentalizing them. And Christians, we as Christians are always showing how they're in disharmony, right? They're never properly unified. They're always missing something or all of it. So he's coming back here saying, "Oh well, just because I can't justify," and in more in less specific words, he's basically just saying, "Well, I can't justify the thing I'm claiming, but it doesn't mean I can't give you a case anyway." Up to which you would say, "Well, what did you just do there? You just threw out epistemic justification and tried to bring this in. Why would you do that?"
Right. And you can always ask, ought I believe what you just said?
Yeah, it's kind of like the annoying Seitan Bruggencate idea, but it's always relevant.
Correct.
That's what they do. They're like, "Oh, he's just annoying. He's just blue collar." The question isn't whether you like him, whether he's annoying. Is it accurate? Is it relevant to the conversation?
Right. If my question bears repeating, it's because you haven't answered it. And so even though Seitan does the how do you know, I'm going from the moral realm that ought I, it's because you have not satisfied your own foundational requirements by which you're trying to hold me to.
Yes, and that's it right there. Those two categories, those two pillars, epistemology and ethics, the ought I, and how do you know, that basically wipes out all these guys. So I think you're going to be the guy to do this unannoyingly, with articulation. You just have to be able to hold your constantly being marginalized. People trying to get you act out. People trying to get you pissed off, trying to turn you into a Darth Dawkins, somebody who's not relevant. But if you don't do that, I don't see how these guys are going to stop you. Your understanding is too good, too embedded. It seems to be like something that you're just you wake up without any doubt. I don't know. Sometimes some of these philosophies slip away. You know what I mean? Like for me anyway, like I hone in on it, or I'm taking a walk and something connects that I've been thinking about for a long time. But then it kind of slips away from me when I get in a conversation with somebody.
Well, what really helps is like having a notes app or like bouncing your thoughts off AI and just asking for the maximum scrutiny. Is like pull from all philosophy. What am I missing? What am I lacking? And then of course you need like a personal source besides that eventually, because AI is either going to sugarcoat it or it's going to have probably at some point a secular basis from which it cannot fully, even if it gives you a high marker, it cannot fully account for very creative objections that because if you have a creative argument, the creative argument's going to face creative objections, and so there's always things to critique and parse at, and that's why that's why I went on Matt, because I felt just confident enough to see Seth Andrews and Matt Dillahunty. I'm like, you know what, if I'm wrong, let's just throw this in the fire and see what comes out. And what came out was moral outrage, even though you ought not think correctly. Or there is no existent ought to think one way or the other, and yet there's value. And of course, is value made of matter? No. Okay, what makes it prescriptive? Nothing makes it prescriptive. then what is value? What are we even talking about here? And then the answer is, shut up, here's my mute button. And it 3 times he starts singing to coax himself in this thing.
Oh,
He sings.
wow.
Dude, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it's a good marker of something really getting to him. I would say.
Yeah,
Suggest,
I've
never heard him do that. Yeah.
No, it was bizarre. He told me I wasn't going to break his Zen, and I'm like, I'm not trying to break your Zen. I'm trying to get your answer. I didn't even know you had a Zen, to be perfectly clear.
No, I have a Zen. I don't have an answer. You're not listening. Wait, did I say that? I mean, yeah, that's. I mean, it's kind of everything. Like, oh, we're going to make an atheist channel and hope that no one ever asks what the odd is.
Yeah. Now, I do raise my voice a few times here. I don't regret anything I said. It may have been true that I could have said it better, but of the things that I did say, I don't regret it. It just, I come in, I still have, I guess, this naivete that I come in and I think smart people are going to be good faith because they profess they want good faith. And it's just never, it's not never true, but it's like, there's a YouTuber named Objective Ethics, and he and I had a really calm, rational back and forth when I used this argument. And he admitted that he couldn't, it was fair pushback, that just because something's true, he cannot tell me I ought to believe it. That's at least honest. And Matt's engagement here was, I would argue, calculated, but calculated honestly and spoken honestly, that he could not justify an ought, that I ought to believe what is true. But then why do you do anything that you do? Like, I can't think of anything sadder than protesting the ark. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's it's so absurd. Like you sorry, go ahead. No, I'm just gonna rant. You go ahead.
I was just saying, have you ever asked somebody, an unbeliever, like at some point in the conversation or at the beginning, like, ask yourself, why would I ever be under your subjective system in this exchange?
That's why asking what the tiebreaker is such a great question, because he's going to make a transcendental claim necessarily. He's going to make a value claim necessarily. He's going to make a prescriptive claim necessarily, just in that one answer.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I actually got a dip, but I look forward to more of your review.
Okay, man. I might have to dip out myself, but we'll talk again.
Yep.
I like what you're doing, man. Take care.
Demonstrate that accurate beliefs have more value, both to the survival of the individual. Not in all cases. There are cases where have more equal value. We can demonstrate that accurate beliefs have more value, both.
So he's smuggling in a couple things there, right? Accurate beliefs and more value. That's the thing. That's what re-exam was talking about. You have to keep drawing them back to, how do you know? Well, where's the ought? Because even when you talk about accuracy, it assumes that there's a target and that we ought to hit the target. And then more value is, again, begging the question, because he doesn't have a system that can locate value other than his arbitrary preference, which he already nuked himself at the beginning. And we were pointing out that the nukes are subtle, a lot of times. Like, people aren't even picking up on it. He's basically saying, I don't have to justify myself. He doesn't have to justify himself of how he knows these things. And when he brings in value and evaluations of what ought to be, it's his personal preference. So that's why we had, them pausing and not knowing what to do here, is because re-exam actually has them fully stifled, has them by the balls, if you want to say that. So this becomes an exercise for re-exam to, just keep his cool and let them talk and choose what he wants to go after, because almost every claim is going to be erroneous in their assumptions of the ought, of the value, and of course, the lack of epistemic justification, how they know this.
To the survival of the as an actual imperative doesn't mean they're of equal value. We can demonstrate that accurate beliefs have, I mean,
Okay, so
conclusion necessarily.
you try to hash out this whole blunder. This is the essence of Dillahunty, right? Like a used car salesman. Like you're having your doubts about what he's saying, but then he points, look at this. He points to something that may be favorable, and you want to buy it. You want to buy the used car, but really it's empty rhetoric, and it helps to pause this and to weed it out, because again, you want to reflect back on what he opened with. He doesn't have any justification for knowledge, and oughts and shoulds are just preferences. So he has a broken worldview here, right? He can't justify why he knows things, ultimately why he believes things. And when he points and talks or argues about values and what ought to be the case and what you should do, it's just a preference. It's what he's feeling at the moment. So when you take that and carry it with you through the conversation, like the negative information, carrying it through the car sale, right? He's going to point out things that entice you a little bit, but then you rely back on the fact that he already told you the engine is broken, right? Matt's engine is broken, but he still wants to sell you his car. So listen to his claim after telling you that he doesn't know, and what you ought to do is just a whim that he came up with.
No, I'm sorry, but you're just wrong.
Necessarily.
The fact that you can't justify believing true things and not believing false things as an actual imperative.
No, he needs to say the fact that I can't justify. See, that's even part of the rhetoric. The fact that you can't, trying to throw out the authoritative assumption that we're all in this together. We can't. The fact that you can't. More properly, you say, speak for yourself. You can't justify, but you want to move forward anyway.
The fact that you can't justify believing true things and not believing false things as an actual imperative doesn't mean they're of equal value. We can demonstrate that accurate beliefs have more value, both to the survival of the individual, not in all.
The survival of the individual. So now he's positing in a goal, right? His own objective, if he wants to call it that, well-being, flourishing, thriving, the survival of the individual. So there's a lot that happens, right, in those quick 5 seconds. He tries to frame a problem we're all having when it's his problem. He tries to assume an accuracy, saying, it doesn't mean they're equal value. We can demonstrate that accurate, what does he say here? The accurate
imperative doesn't mean they're of equal value. We can demonstrate that accurate beliefs have
accurate beliefs. Again, assuming a truth, assuming that we ought to adhere to accurate beliefs that are demonstrated. What's he going to say if you say, wait, are you saying that we ought to follow demonstrations that are accurate? Well, he's going to have to fall back on his sword again and say, well, no, that's just my opinion right now in the moment. It could change at any time. It has no backing or actual foundation that's concrete. So it's just sales rhetoric over and over. That's why you have to pause it and really see what's being said here. This is where he gets the name, the bloviator, right? He just talks and talks and talks so he can not get slowed down and give an account for this, of which he already said he can't give an account for this. So it's wonderful in its own way. I think that's really what re-exam is honing in on, the fact when you really focus on one pillar of philosophy like ethics, you realize, wow, the whole world is moving in a way that, they're guided by something other than the hand of God. And it becomes a very perplexing journey, I would say, because there's a lot of things that need to happen. The knowledge is there, but now you need to navigate in a way that people understand, that the unbeliever's not always offended and antagonistic, that you're gentle in your approach and your response. You basically, I think, re-exam's going to find himself in the role as a teacher to most people. So back to Matt. So he just smuggled in. He's just continually smuggling in values, is one way to put this.
Have more value, both to the survival of the individual. Not in all cases. There are cases where false beliefs might be beneficial, but that doesn't mean that they're of equal value. However,
value system error 404, right? He's using this arbitrary value system, file not found. It sounds good. A lot of things that Matt says sound good. You say, wow, that sounds good. That really sounds good. All I need you to do is give a justification of why that's the case and why I ought to adhere to that information. That's basically the whole game. That sounds really good, Matt. That sounds really reasonable. All I need you to do to finish this is give me justification for the claims prior, and then some sort of responsibility obligation as to why I ought to consider what you're saying or follow it in any line of reasoning as true, as something that I can rely on, something that's real. And it's a constant falling short.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so then we're making a value claim about survival and well-being, right? So that would be the tiebreaker between any considerations.
Well, no, I'm saying that is a potential tiebreaker between those. There, people might have personal preferences. That doesn't.
That's all you have. That's all you have. So he's sort of removing himself from that category. People have, well, maybe he's not.
Most beliefs might be beneficial, but that doesn't mean that they're of equal value. However, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, however, it doesn't mean they're of equal value according to my personal preference at the moment. That's all he said. He interrupted re-exam to say, whoa, I don't think you're right about the value, because even though I can't justify what I'm saying or apply a value to anything real, I don't think that that's correct because my feelings don't think so right now. Don't think that's what he said. That is actually the substance of what he said. Hold on a sec. I've got to... I'm doing two things at once here.
Oh, I was just going to say, so then we're making a value claim about survival and well-being, right? So that would be the tiebreaker between any considerations.
Good. Yeah, so I think he mentioned the tiebreaker when he was here, and it's establishing just two preferences to break the tie. Let's see. I don't have to convince them if they refuse, but I'm able to neutralize their objections. Yeah. Convincing them is the never-ending game of, never-ending moving goalposts. You can have their name, the stars align, and their name written in the sky. God is real, and they can write it off as a hallucination. It's just, there's no end to convincing them. That's why they like that game. But yeah, neutralizing their objections, neutralizing their arguments. That's the idea. Challenging their assumptions, their presuppositions, because you're showing that, okay, you've been criticizing believers, but when we critique you and ask you how you know things and why I ought to adhere to the things you say, there's nothing there except your feelings. So maybe you ought to calm down on, criticizing believers. That's the idea. So what's the point? Do we need your theological grounding to accept moral truth and responsibility? Well, if you don't think you need grounding in God, go ahead and speak what moral truth are and responsibility are. That would be the way to handle that. What if there's a false belief, then all the true beliefs that we haven't invented yet? Yeah, sure. It could go on and on and on. The what ifs, if we don't have any foundation, obligation in the realm and domain of ethics, what you have is secular belief, like an infinite suggestion of what ifs. What ifs? Mass was asked if we universally ought to believe what is true and reject what is false. Oh yeah, you're just telling Alonia. And he said no. Yeah, he basically refuted himself at the beginning. The re-exam did a great job of asking him the right type of question that got him to say, well, that got Matt to say, I don't really know anything that I can justify. And the things we ought to do, the morals are just preferences. And we were pointing out how Matt uses language like we and I agree when there's no agreement been made and there's no we, it's just him. It's deceptive language that you can follow in the unbeliever that I would say it's embedded in them. Like they've taken folly, they've suppressed the truth. So when they get cornered, they start saying things like we and assuming, trying to frame that you have the same problem. That's another one too, by the way. When unbelievers get caught, you'll notice the tu quoques come up. It's a common logical fallacy. Well, you do it too. They get cornered in ethics, obviously, and say, oh, well, I have subjective ethic and so do you. You have the same problem. And the believer is saying, no, I'm saying I'm grounded in the foundation of God and Jesus Christ. That's not my position. That's your problem. So you want to point out the tu quoque because it shows how when they're cornered, they resort to more logical fallacies. If you do it gently enough, and they're honest enough, they can see what they're doing there. That's the point. Not to make a display of mockery out of them, but to get them to question themselves. Okay, let's see if we can go back. So re-exam is asking him a tiebreaker question, which is good. He's getting them to think about what they're actually saying.
Oh, I was just going to say, so then we're making a value claim about survival and well-being, right? So that would be the tiebreaker between any considerations.
Well, no, I'm saying that is a potential tiebreaker. But
yeah, that's a potential tiebreaker. Like Hitler thought that the well-being of the world, in a grand picture in his mind, meant that non-survival of the Jews needed to happen. So Matt is has the same system, or a system that can't refute Adolf Hitler when he says, well, I think well-being means the entire world, and I think the world would have more thriving and well-being if we exterminate a certain race. That line of thinking is on par with Dillahunty ethics.
between those, people might have personal preferences. That doesn't mean that their personal preferences have anything to do with well-being. I'm trying.
What? The thing about well-being, if you want to point to like health markers and so forth, sure. But what's being pointed out to here, Matt, is that when you posit well-being as part of the objective, when you try to posit it as the goal or foundation, that's your preference. See, these guys don't understand when they're crossing categories. Like they're taking something that they're saying, oh, it's scientific fact, or it's data that we can all agree on, that well-being means your heart's in good condition, your blood pressure isn't too high. Sure, but when you move that into a category of that ought to be the case, that ought to be the goal, this is just a preference, which you said at the beginning. So you're constantly like having to be vigilant of how they're crossing categories, making category errors, and it's all subjective.
Well, no, I'm saying that is a potential tiebreaker between those. People might have personal preferences. That doesn't mean that their personal preferences have anything to do with well-being. I'm trying to figure out.
See, his whole position is a personal preference, even if he posits well-being as part of that preference. That's what re-exam knows. He's like, your whole position's a preference. Your whole position is an unjustified preference. It's a form of hedonism, really.
So you're calling in to say the Christian God is the best description for morality. Did the Christian God have David's wives raped?
So now you could call that a good move for Matt, right? But you could also say, well, hold on, Matt, hold on. You've established that you don't know anything that you can justify, and that rape or whatever moral conundrum you want to bring in is a preference. And I understand you're trying to do an internal critique of what I believe, the scriptures, God, our creator. However, you're not even going to be able to finish this conversation, because when you do an internal critique, you're assuming that you know and understand things. And I guess I'm supposed to grant that to you, that you understand the interworkings of the Bible, the interpretation of the Bible, and you somehow also understand how that binds us to a moral obligation. It's a lot of grants you need to go into that internal critique. And I could even agree with you on your critique. However, at the end of it all, you can't actually put together a case in your own worldview, in your position, that tells me why rape is wrong. So interestingly enough, the borrow is what you're doing. You're going into my worldview and trying to make me think about, well, this is how your worldview is supposed to work. Don't you agree? Don't you agree? It's not supposed to be contradictory. Don't you agree? And whereas I can agree with you, you can't actually put together a case from your worldview. So interestingly enough, it's a navigation that's showing you when you get in my worldview, you can make sense. But then when you go back to your worldview, it collapses. There's no unity. There's no unifying factor except you and your feelings at the current moment. So what becomes interesting is, an interesting thing you could say to somebody is like, wow, from my worldview, it does seem wrong. Rape is wrong. However, if I take on your worldview, Matt, I don't have to worry about rape. I just have to worry about getting caught.
Yeah. And here's the difference.
And
like
and that
Andrew
was a
saying
good thing.
earlier,
And that was a good thing.
That in terms of judgment, on the primary level, God cannot categorically be blameworthy because there's no authority above him. You just can't engineer that. So
We were just talking about this. We were just talking
about
divine command theory and vertical morality.
I'm
not
sorry.
interested.
I reject divine command theory. I reject divine command theory.
I'm sorry, Patrick. You're saying that it was a good thing to have David's wives raped.
There's an equivocation going on here between primary and
secondary. No, there's no equivocation going on. Can God do anything that is not good? Can God do anything that is not good? Can God do anything that is not good? Can God do it?
Wow, he's going to stay there because he's comfortable there, right? He's going to keep repeating that.
Anything that is not good. Can God do anything that is not good? Can God do anything that is not good? Can God do anything that is not good? You're not going to get to say another word till you answer that question. Can God do anything that is not good?
That is funny. What if true and false are not applicable terms for morality? What if the best we can say is better or worse? Well, better or worse is still going to have to be based on some sort of spectrum, some sort of judgment call based on some sort of reality that exists that we are able to pick up on. That is better, that is worse. So it's basically just, we're just exchanging terms. It's the same problem. Well, if he rages at Rex, I mean, on what grounds?
You're not going to let me parse because you know that I can make it make sense without you.
No, I'm going to mute you. I'm not going to let you lie.
Oh, he's not going to let him lie. Well, on Matt's worldview, lying isn't right or wrong. It's just he doesn't like the lie, the alleged lie happening to him right now. But if he wants to mute and be dishonest, well, that's a lie that you might construe that as a deception or deceptive behavior, You see where this goes with the subjective framework that Matt holds? The irony that Rex is pointing out is always making moral claims. You need to answer this. Tell me what the good is. I'm not going to let you lie. That's the beauty of focusing in on ethics and morals. It's the human condition. Like all these discussions entail behavior, modifications, people's giving their perspective and trying to impart it onto other people. There's so many implied oughts and shoulds, never ending amount of them. And Matt's actually stuck here, so he's resorting to, you know, a biblical story about rape. So there's a few different ways to go about this at this point. Now Matt's getting kind of aggressive here. Let's see what re-exam does.
To answer this question, liar, you can then go on to try to make yourself look good. But the reality is, you've already said that God had David's wife.
I'm getting a little distracted here. So just give me a minute. I might have to go, but it's fine. I think what I'd like to do is, I can't really get any atheist to come in and talk to me. I think re-exam is more mild-mannered. He's got more of a, well, you know, he's already more established in the domain. He's talking to Dillahunty, Andrew Wilson. He's more outgoing. I think the idea of like getting an atheist to come talk and just having, you know, either re-exam or myself talking to them, there's usually a disconnect when it gets into the deeper topics, which are actually the fundamental topics, the basics, epistemology and ethics, where atheists just get lost or they start committing logical fallacy. So if you have two people, and I think it's not really a bad cop, good cop, it's more of like two mild-mannered people who are able to express it or put it into different words to get across to the atheist. Because at this point, I just want people to understand what's being talked about, you know, because it seems like when you're dealing with like Dillahunty here, like he understands the problem, but then he just wants to go ahead and argue anyway, you know. And if people are doing that, then that's completely dishonest, or they need to at least say, look, I don't know what else to do. You know, I can understand if you have a channel established. Yeah, all right. I'm just got a couple things going on, but I do enjoy this topic. Yeah, this is not going to work. You don't accept they have any knowledge, so what's the point? Well, all right. We don't say that they don't have any knowledge. Yeah, a re-exam. I guess I'll call you Patrick. Is that your name? I think it is. Right, it's epistemic justification, Elonia. No, the atheist does, yeah, they were saying the atheist does know things, but we want to account for that. It really is basic philosophy. Like, you can learn this in Philosophy 101. You don't just get to say that you know things and believe things. Well, you can, but if someone asks why or how, it's on the table. So the atheist, we say, yeah, you know 2 + 2 = 4. Yeah, we both know that. How do you give an account for that? That obviously gets to be an interesting conversation with a materialist, because now they're tapping into 2 + 2 = 4, some immaterial invariant construct that's mapped onto reality that we don't locate in space and time through physics or science, but we all know it's true. We build systems, complex systems, rocket engines, with mathematics. We have the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence that we find in nature. So you do know things. The believer just points out how you can't give an account for these things that you know. That's what they're challenging you on. Epistemic justification. It's no wonder that you're lost, Elonia. Most atheists are lost when it comes to epistemic justification. Matt recognizes it in this conversation. He just says, oh, I don't have it. But then he wants to go on anyway. So you have to keep drawing him back to his original claim, but which gets annoying and makes you look like a sophist. But it's quite the contrary. You're pointing out the sophist. How do you know? How do you know? Why ought I care? Why ought anybody adhere to that? Over and over and over again, because they just want to skip past it. So, what I'm going to be thinking about, and Patrick is already thinking about, is how do we get to overcome a different level of nonsense? The point where you move them to pointing out and admitting they don't know anything for certain, and every claim is falling back on a synthetic ought, a preference of how we ought to behave. So how are we going to engage with people who won't let go of that? Either say they understand or don't understand. Either way, they just want to move forward. You have to keep stopping them at the door. Look at this. If a rocket engine works, that's a justification. See, that's the type of, you got Dillahunty brain, right? Like, he tries to use justification as utility, like, oh, it works. What is logic? Where is logic? I don't know. It just is. When people argue it just is at the base, or brute facts, you can still challenge that. It becomes a dogmatic belief system, a faith-based belief system, in the one who rejects faith in Jesus Christ. So they have an arbitrary evaluation of what is to be accepted and what isn't. So saying something works is not what we want. It's like, you can use an analogy with like a car, right? Like, you can say, oh, how does your car work, man? He's like, I don't know. It just does. I turn in the keys and it goes. And you're saying, well, no, let's look at the components of the engine. Let's look at the everything, right? Let's look at why, when you put the key in there and turn it, what is going on with the ignition? What is firing there? He's like, I don't care. It just works. Philosophy is the guy who wants to know how the car works, not that it just works. If it just works as a justification, you can make arguments like, well, I believe in God and my life is improved, so it just works and I win. That's what happens when you make it just works arguments, Elonia. You can have them used against you. Yes, it's either an unjustified value claim or a mere descriptive claim without meaning. No one's being slippery with terms. I think that you're not understanding the substance behind what's being said here. It's not a term issue. The nature of it, that just is. This is a common one. This is where Dillahunty got stuck by Jay Dyer, right? He's talking about logic. He's saying, how do you account for logic on your worldview, Matt? And he's like, it just is. I presuppose it, you presuppose it, it just is. And he says, well, if I say it just is, that's an arbitrary claim about a fundamental idea that you're using, something you're calling an invariant, immaterial law of reality, of thought, of debate, the laws of logic, you're saying it just is. So that's arbitrary. It becomes ad hoc. It moves into every claim that you make and everything that you try to justify. This magical, unidentified source of it just is that we call logic becomes ad hoc and relevant in all of this discussion. And that's where Matt was stopped with Jay Dillahunty. But, you know, he went and had a cope stream with Alex Malpass and Ozzy, which I don't know if they really did anything. They just talked about how they don't like transcendental categories, which makes sense because they can't really justify talking about transcendental categories, and they're inescapable in conversations.
Wives raped. In the story, David sinned, and as a punishment to David, God had David's wives raped. And I asked you if that's a good thing. And your parsing is, well, there's no way to judge God. There's no authority above God. No. Can God do anything that is not good? Does God only do good? You won't answer that question with a yes or no, which would allow you to continue, because the fact of the matter is, you know that the Bible represents God as, well, actually the Bible represents God as potentially good and evil on different occasions. But is it a good thing? This is the question. I'm even going to type it in above my head, because you're not.
So he feels like he's got you locked in here, right? With this tough question. He's like, he's all about it. He's muting you. He asked it 10 times, literally like asked it 10 times in a row, which is good because that same thing is going to come back to him with how do you know, why ought I? You know, you can recollect moments like that. Like, oh, I recall you continually asking me this. So, you know, it seems to be fair play that you need to answer this. But he's holding on to something here. Like, oh, I've got you here. With rape is not good. Explain this. So he's really hot right here. He wants this.
Not gonna bust my zen with your lies.
What's the lie? Did you just lie that he lied to you? A lot of irony here.
Was it good to have David's wives raped? There we go. I'm going to put this above my head. This is the question. Was it good? Here's the question for Patrick. Patrick, I'm bringing you back now. There'll be a beep, but you didn't miss anything. So was it good to have David's wives raped?
Is a malformed question. You won't accept it. You know the primary and secondary causation, and you will not let me clarify that. So here's the primary and secondary causation.
No, I'm sorry.
He's like, you're right. I won't let you clarify that. Mute.
I don't know how many times I have to explain this to you, dishonest, lying Christians.
So now you're in a category of other people, dishonest, lying, which his feelings don't like lying in that vicinity. Lying in other ways can be acceptable in his world, but he just doesn't like him in particular right now in that particular way, as he's expressed.
Just answer this question, and then I will give you the space to try to rehabilitate yourself. You won't answer it because you fundamentally know that everyone who ever watches this is going to have a reaction to rape and to using rape as a punishment. Rape as a punishment would be wrong even if the person who was being raped was the one who did wrong and was being punished. That would still be immoral.
Based on what standard? Your emphatic pleading?
It's especially immoral.
Oh, he's got especially too. Wow. He has these robust categories after starting the conversation with, oh, it's just a preference, the odds, the things I'm disgusted with, the value system, it's just something I make up. It could change any moment. But all of a sudden, listen how robust it is now. This is situational, emotional pleading, right? This is subjectivity. You don't really have anything, so you just make it sound more robust, more verbose.
Who was being raped was the one who did wrong and was being punished. That would still be immoral. It's especially immoral and wrong if it's done to punish someone else. It reinforces the idea that his wives are his property, and I will punish you by doing harm and damage to your property.
None of that stuff is wrong in Matt's worldview, so he must be borrowing someone else's worldview. That's going to be the overall point, right? He's got wrong, especially wrong, based on what? Again, if he wants to do an internal critique, once he's done doing that, we go and point out, well, that's interesting, because you seem to think that part of the Bible or that part of the idea of ethics is true, that we ought to never do that, or especially if we do that. However, when we get into your actual worldview, it's not bound by anything. There's no unifying factor except that you feel that way at the current moment. So you can't make an argument against Patrick. You can try to get him to buy your internal critique, but when he asks you to finish the conversation, now tell me why it's wrong for me to contradict myself, to hold contradictory beliefs, to hold to things that are not true and believe them. To finish the conversation, Matt, tell me why that's the case. And he asks, well, I don't know. I don't know.
So I'm going to give you one more chance to answer this question. If you don't answer this question, I'm going to change the question. So, was it good to have David's wife raped?
It's a malformed question without primary.
Okay. Since you're not going to answer that question, we're going to come up with a different question.
Why don't you let him answer as to why it's malformed? Because you're going into another question. If you listen to why it's malformed, you could make sure your next question is not malformed, but you don't want to take correction, right? You just want to be right. Again, you don't know right from wrong. So if you don't see how your whole philosophy is a game, I don't know what to tell you.
We'll see if this one isn't malformed. Doo-doo-doo. How you doing, Seth?
I'm just
Well, there he said, we'll see if this one isn't malformed, because he's defensive, isn't he? He's defensive. Like, oh, how dare he suggest that it's malformed? He's so defensive that he can't even listen to Patrick explain how it's malformed, which instead of guessing the next one isn't malformed, he could short that by saying, oh, okay, well, I see why that's malformed, but he doesn't want to take any correction. PMars, how you doing, man? PMars, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Yeah.
Good. Did you happen to see this exchange?
No, I was going to ask you, what is this from?
Re-exam is calling in from the comments. Patrick is re-exam in the side there.
Who is is he from your chat? Re-exam.
Yeah, he was in here.
Oh, sick. Awesome.
Yeah, he's good. He was in here about 15, 20 minutes ago, but he had to leave. But he's very well versed on understanding the ethical position.
Does he do? Does he make YouTube videos?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go subscribe to him.
Definitely. He's already got Matt to admit up front earlier in the video that he has no justification for his knowledge claims, and that his moral imperatives are merely preferences. So it's a destruction from the beginning, but Matt, of course, wants to carry on anyway and point out Bible wrong. So that's where we are.
just trying to figure out how you can even approach the idea of rape with an equivocation or a pause, how it cannot be immediately condemned.
Well, it's weird that you actually said that, because the question that I was typing, which I'm now going to put over my head, which we're going to bring
Approach the idea. I'm just trying to figure out how you can even approach the idea of rape with an equivocation or a pause, how it cannot be immediately condemned.
Interesting. So this man with a subjective moral system is perplexed by the fact that someone would not just be horrified or show indignation for rape. It's so obvious that it's wrong. Yet when you ask him why it's wrong, he doesn't know.
He's doing the self-evident thing.
Yeah, it's going to be some sort of brute fact that he's going to try to rely on, an axiom, but still arbitrary. Like, you can agree with him, like, yeah, rape is abhorrent, but I have a justification.
Well, we don't really agree, because I think if the authority, like surface level, we would agree, but
True.
the metaphysics are going to be different.
Right. It's a matter of pointing out, like, well, I could say I agree with you. However, when we trace back how we get to this agreement, we really don't agree. So he's trying to just it's basically an emotional appeal, right? Like, how could you not be condemning such a thing?
Well, it's weird that you actually said that, because the question that I was typing, which I'm now going to put over my head, which we're going to bring Patrick in to try and dodge again, is this. Patrick, under what circumstances should someone be raped as punishment? That's the next question.
Okay, King David.
Yeah, he's doing King David. What if you answered, well, Matt, I think that the proper... Well, go ahead.
Well, it just shows like he doesn't care about context. So like, it was like customary in their society to display like, I'm the king now. The way you show people you're the king now is you sleep with the previous king's concubines. That was like a standard thing in their culture, right? So we're gonna ignore that,
Well,
Hey, so I wanted to say my given answer, I think I engaged too much with this question, because the answer I give is quote, by who, which is not the right answer, because obviously God's not doing anything like that. But in terms of like the authority on which God can use any punishment he wants, God does have that authority, right? So, but again, I should have just said it was a malformed question, because what he's casting is a wide net between God being like on the same level as us and having the same level of accountability as us, which doesn't work. But that's one critique I have on myself upon reflection. So because it is all optics really, but I could have engaged the optics better on this one. It's still a malformed question, and the better move would have been to point that out as well. And of course, that is a malformed question.
Yeah, well, he's not letting you; he's muting you. So you can only get so much here. But this is I'm on the PMars is joined. PMars, you were asking about re-exam. This is him, Patrick, on the panel.
Hi, PMars. I've heard about you over the course of different channels.
Probably not good things. I gave you a sub.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, PMars, he knows the arguments well too, and he's learned a lot from Darth Dawkins, so he gets a lot of criticisms for that. But
yeah, I get most of the people I interact with are like super disingenuous, and they use like, I'm just asking questions, I'm just trying to have a conversation. It's like some defense for like being rude and obnoxious and lying.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I think you guys, both you guys are characters of interest. You have different attitudes about the approach, both very knowledgeable. So, I hope to get more conversations or critiques like this on this channel.
I'm trying to find what your channel is called.
PMars, yeah. You want to put your channel there?
Yeah, because I have what seems to be like blasphemous channels, which are apparently here to target you.
Oh, it's PMars versus atheism. Maybe that doesn't show up.
Yeah, you find some interesting approaches in handling unbelievers. PMars, he's a wild card. For sure.
So is that you being Electric Bike Jesus 2856?
Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Got it.
I think
All
those
right, but yeah, upon reflection, just wanted to say that this was not my best move, and I'm just gonna say that openly.
Yeah, but I want to. Okay, it's 125.35. I want to show PMars what you got him to admit at the Open though.
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll go back to 125.35.
Thing that is not good.
It is.
Can God
it
do
is-
any?
Oh.
Well, the beginning was
I
what?
think my original.
116, 117.
Well, I don't even remember what I put in chat.
Throwing a little
Yeah.
context, you saw a talk that Matt gave?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, with allegedly Ian, and I saw that he was leaning towards moral realism. Matt, I did not mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify and give context for everybody if you wanted to fill in where you're at with moral realism.
I'm getting ready to do a new video, and it's not necessarily moral realism. It's an objective foundation that goes beyond what I used to have before. But no, I don't necessarily think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference, and I don't know how to justify that as an ought.
What do you think about
Pretty
that?
telling.
How'd you like that confession?
Well, I mean, I appreciate that because
Yeah, absolutely.
like I talked to a guy the other day who tried to act like he could ground morals, and then it was just he gave me a bunch of philosoph mumbo jumbo, and that like never really, he just gave me a bunch of abstract, vague language rather than like what concretely grounds these things. He never really addressed it, but yet was claiming he could ground morals and naturalism.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like a T-jump or something.
I will give Matt this too. At the end, he gives me a free 60 seconds, and I just try and speed run as many points as I can, and he does allow me to do it. So there's that.
Yeah, that's cool.
That goes beyond what I used to have before. But no, I don't necessarily think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference, and I don't know how to justify that as an ought.
Yeah, you say you appreciate that, PMars, because any point at the conversation falls back on that, which is, I don't know. He's telling you, I don't know. I can't justify any ought claims other than preferences.
Can I make a good quick point about he's going to try to go, oh, God told, God punished David by having his wives get raped, right?
Uh-huh.
So in my study Bible, it says, in ancient times, for the passage, in ancient times, the appropriation of the royal harem demonstrated possession of the throne. So it's literally like a cultural thing for that culture to do that. It's like, so it's like it's not like God is really making, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, God did say that would be the direct punishment for what he did, and even if that was the practice of the time, that doesn't mean that it had the consent of the women. So I'm just going to grant it, so as not to like defend anything.
But it's like
it's hard to defend like
what
that.
God's doing, God is allowing it to happen. They act like God is causing the rape. God is removing his protection to allow it to happen.
Correct, which is why primary and secondary causation is crucial. And that's why I brought up in my review video of this, which is like, nobody gets around the predestination and free will question. Nobody, not a single worldview. They try and stick it on Christianity, but you have that in, as I said to JG here, you have that in atheism too, where you're just the continued unfurling of the Big Bang in chemical flesh form. You could just be a physics puppet, and then any crime or atrocity you commit is really just the continuation of the Big Bang echoing throughout time and space. It's no more than that. And so, and then you can just deny personal accountability on that if you want to. But of course, no atheist is going to allow that.
Yeah. Well, the same is going to apply to reason too. So like any conclusion is going to be the result of like non-rational causal processes as opposed to like a rational inference. So, anything what Matt Dillahunty would call reason is really just like an event in his brain that was like determined to happen.
Yeah, there's no causality that he can actually come. The transcendental categories is where they're gonna always.
Yeah, because It's going to reduce to a non-rational causal force because they deny that mind is at the bottom.
Yeah.
So that just totally screws them in everything.
Hey, let me address Eliono real quick. He says, I'm completely open to option that there may not be a grounding for morality, or if there is, humanity may never know it. The problem is you would need a grounding in order to use a logical framework to come to that determination as opposed to other determinations.
Yes.
Well, also, you're not going to be able to live your life as if morality is ungrounded. Everyone lives as if there are objective morals, because when you order coffee and it takes an hour to get your coffee, you're going to say this is the worst barista ever. So that's applying an obligation onto someone else when you do that.
Yeah, here's the difference. In argumentation, Christians, even though they do sin from time to time, and some of them have had worse stumbles than others, how they live their life on average does map on to what they're saying and their belief system about accountability, rationality, truth, consistency, all that kind of stuff. The atheist can only simulate that in debate and then continue to live their life in total contradiction of that. So there's an asymmetry there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Should someone be raped as punishment? That's the next question.
In terms of those who can do the raping, obviously nobody should rape anybody, but that's the secondary clarification that you won't allow to come out.
I'm sorry. I just allowed you to say that. I asked you under what circumstances. You did not answer my question. So here we go. Try this again.
So he just offset his muting you to I just allowed you. That's slimy.
Yeah, it's post hoc justification or post hoc self-justification. It was like, well, I did. It's like, okay, but I'm talking about the past, number one, and number two,
Yeah.
the mindset there inductively would be like, he's going to mute me because I'm going to answer my way and not his way.
Yeah.
And Patrick, under what circumstances should rape be used as a punishment?
By whom?
Well, in Matt's worldview, anyone that you can dream up, first of all. But
Yeah. So real quick.
Anyone.
Real quick. So when I say by whom, I actually, looking back, I don't actually think it was as bad an answer as I thought it was, because punishment, in order to have justified punishment, I mean, it wouldn't be punishment if it wasn't justified. It would just be assault at that point. But punishment would have to come from an authority, and that authority would have to be therefore justified to be an actual authority. And then so whether it's hell, whether it's a siege by a foreign nation, whether it's, any form, like let's say God sent a lion to kill a prophet that disobeyed him, right? So does that mean that I can therefore send a lion to kill somebody and do the same because, well, God did it? Like, does he really think that maps onto his mind? And I make one of the points I make in my view is because he lords the show over me, that he can interrupt me and I can't interrupt him. The grand irony that he has no sense of is that because it's his domain, he gets to do what I don't get to do, including things that would be considered rude for me to do and out of place for me to do, but totally justified for him to do because he runs the show. He doesn't get that.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Elonia says that's only in your paradigm, Rex. You might just be wrong. Okay. Well, why should I prefer to be wrong over being right, according to you? Why? What's the tiebreaker? That there's an implied imperative here.
Right, Alonia, you haven't narrowed in on that yet. You haven't figured that out. So you're doing the same thing Dillahunty is doing. As we're pointing out, you just want to keep having the conversation. You can't even work out what right and wrong are before the conversation.
Yeah.
When you listen to the non-believer, they'll constantly make authoritative claims. Like one I hear a lot is, that's not an argument. Well, that's an authoritative claim. Well, what's your authority? Well, I don't have to tell you my authority, right? Like, they'll never tell me their authority. Or sometimes they'll just say, I'm the authority. Well, you can't bind me. Your mind doesn't bind my mind. So, like, the very act of criticizing and making authoritative claims, they're trying to bind our mind, which requires God's mind. Only God can bind and loose. So,
yeah, and I think you might have asked somebody that in the past, PMars, right? Like, why would I be under your subjective system anyway?
Well, see, what they're constantly doing, They're trying to make a human mind do what only God's mind can do. And that's why they always end up in these absurdities.
Okay.
By whom?
I'm sorry.
Anyone.
I'm sorry.
Anyone. Patrick, under what circumstances?
See, they think it's so funny when you ask, like, a question like, why is rape wrong? In this case, it's by whom. It's like, oh, it's so obvious, but they have no explanation for what they're calling obvious.
Because that's all they can do is like do this like confidence. It's like a confidence scam.
It's an emotional appeal. It's not a textbook.
He's trying to look confident when he laughs at you. It's like, look how confident I am. I'm laughing at my opponent. Oh, it's a confidence scam.
So you say, well, yeah, it's so obvious. So why don't you just lay it out? Lay it out philosophically. It's obviously wrong.
Yeah, the problem for them is because the core of this is transcendental, it's unavoidable for them to make value claims with every sentence that they're going to make. And all I need to do is latch onto that value claim. Now, again, Sai or like Bonson or Van Til will do the epistemic thing. I argue that the epistemic thing can be very cerebral, and so people can feel like because they know that they know things, they'll never have to justify how they do it because they know things. The problem is the conscience perceives things rather than deduces things. And the perception is intrinsic to everything. They're not like, I mean, they might prioritize it with logic, but they're not, it's more felt. The conscience is more felt. So hold on.
Yeah, I think the ethics route is the most obvious to like laymen or the audience.
Elonia, when I'm talking about the power differential, what I'm making a point is if somebody owns a thing, they have a disparate claim over what they can do versus what you can do, which is my point. My point wasn't like, do people on YouTube assert their authority over their own channels? That's obviously true, but that's the thing in question, is the authority gives them special standing that other people do not have. That's the same with God. That's the same with how he judges people. And then your next comment, you might just be wrong, is not authoritative. It's just a possibility. Again, the point is to say that it's just authoritative, it's not a possibility, means that in order to make a decision about what's real, you have to value map which direction you ought to go in your thinking. Like everything you're doing presupposes exactly what I'm saying from an ethics perspective.
Yeah, constantly
way out. Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, you gotta constantly point out they're borrowing our capital from our view.
Yeah. Well, I like this because PMars tends to focus on the metaphysic and Patrick tends to focus on the ethics. This is good.
Circumstances should rape be used as a punishment?
By whom?
Anyone.
I'm sorry.
This is not
Matt,
going well for
here's
you,
the deal.
Patrick. Indulge me for a second, Matt. Hang on. I know.
You are here. Hold on.
No.
I know you
Seth
don't want
wants
to
say something,
Colin,
and then I'm going to say something. You're not going to say shit until I say otherwise, Patrick.
The morbid curiosity in me would like to hear him. Would like to give him just enough rope to hang himself and let him go for about 25 seconds. Would that be okay? Because I'm insanely curious as to what comes next.
Yeah, no. Here's the thing. I'm going to unmute you now, Patrick. I know I'm waiting for the beep, and I'm going to say this. So, in answer to your question, when I said under what circumstances should rape be used as a punishment, you said for whom? By God.
Here's what
against someone. Under what circumstances should God use rape as a punishment?
Because he is truth, he can use whatever secondary means he wants to, including the death of anybody in any circumstance. God has decreed from the beginning to the end how things would go, and yet the free will choices of his creatures are still the free will choices of his creatures, regardless, because they did exactly what they wanted to do. Again,
could God have punished David?
Revelation 13.
Could God have punished? I'm sorry, I let you give your answer. Could God have punished David without having his wives raped?
Again, the power differential, the no sense of irony.
Yeah, on and on and on. this guy on top is so happy that you asked that question.
Entirely possible. God could have
Cool.
not had that happen. Yes.
That means that God could have opted for a different punishment, but God specifically opted to have David's wives raped. Correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't know when I was on the air or not. Am I back yet?
Yeah. So God could have used a different punishment, but he opted to use the punishment of having David.
No, because in their culture, any new king would have done the same thing. Any new king would have done the same thing. So I don't see it was going to happen no matter what.
Well, if we're using God in the realm of possibility, God could have had that transition without that occurrence. So I'm just gonna accept the premise that.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I'm not going to say that God is in prison to the culture of the humans, and therefore his omniscience would be nullified. I wouldn't want to fall into that, because then I'm saying that God couldn't have because culture. I don't want to.
What I'm saying, like, yeah, God could do. I mean, it doesn't matter, but I'm just saying, like, the punishment doesn't make sense in our culture, right? But the punishment makes perfect sense if you understand the fact that I'm saying. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. It would be hard to get caught in the weeds. So whatever I can grant.
Yeah.
That's why towards the end, what I say is, God had decreed from the beginning of time every horrible thing that would ever happen, including rape, including murder, the murder of his own son, all these things, babies, women, children. I mean, it's just embrace it. That's what the entailment of Romans 9 is. That's what the entailment of Revelation 13:8 is. That's what the entailment of even Romans 8 is.
Well, what Darth will do to curb stomp these emotional appeals that they do is, like, he'll be like, look, God has already sentenced everyone to death. Everyone is going to die. Everyone has the sentence of death upon them. Now, like, what difference does it make, like, what time and how that plays out? That's all emotional.
Yep.
David's wives raped. Is that correct?
Yeah, he could have used no punishment. He could have had David killed.
I'm sorry. When I ask a yes or no question, I only need the yes because I'm building to the next thing. I'm sorry you don't understand how this works, but we'll get there. So
I said yes.
I'm sorry. I don't know why you're even speaking.
The funny thing is, like, there's nothing I said that should have made it a difference with the yes. I'm giving you the concession.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna come around though. You're gonna figure that out, as he said.
It's my turn right now.
And he could have had David killed.
I'm sorry. When I ask a yes or no question, I only need the yes because I'm building to the next thing. I'm sorry you don't understand how this works, but we'll get there. So
I said yes.
I'm sorry. I don't know why you're even speaking. It's my turn right now. It's matter of fact, it's almost always my turn. But here we go.
What is the point of saying that?
My toys.
Yeah. That's so sad that he said that. I get it.
Well, that's why I'm like, I was just gonna say that's why he sings like 2 or 3 times. He says stuff that is unbearably childish like that, and I don't think I said anything childish yet that I can recall.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think that's a good sign that the power of your argument, that the demeanor of your character not being abrasive is getting him to act foolish.
I just realized this guy on the screen is the co-host. I thought it was Patrick.
No, people think that. No, he's got a bit. Seth Andrews has a way better voice than I do. He sounds like the guy who is like Optimus Prime. He sounds like Optimus Prime.
Yeah, well, it helps to have a good voice when you have no substance behind what you're saying.
I said yes.
I'm sorry. I don't know why you're even speaking. It's my turn right now. It's matter of fact, it's almost always my turn. But here we go.
I know.
If God could have, yes, I know. Would you shut up so I don't have?
You can't even agree with that.
I feel like a second-class citizen, Matt.
Is it ever justified to interrupt somebody? And then when he gives his answer, I'll interrupt him. No.
He's such a fussy boy.
Yeah, I
If
know.
God could have, yes, I know. Would you shut up so I don't have to mute you again and let me finish? Thanks. If God could have used a different punishment, but God opted to use this punishment, then I'm assuming you are fine with God using that punishment. You don't have any objection. You don't have any moral objection, right?
This is a conflation all the way down from the beginning to the end.
This is really simple. This is really simple, Patrick.
No, it's simple to you if you're not able to parse
Patrick,
it. Yeah.
Patrick, okay. I'm not going to let you bust my Zen. You're not fucking worth it.
What? Come on.
I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to type the question again because you're a little, floundering. You've already basically acknowledged this.
Is that a projection?
He won't allow him to say it's a loaded question. That's crazy. You should be allowed to say, well, I feel like it's a loaded question. And then
Right. Now, if I feel it's a loaded question, the burden of proof is now on me to explain how it's loaded. But he won't even allow me to be in the spotlight or be in the hot seat by which I can have a chance to do that. That's kind of weird. Why doesn't he let me hold the burden of proof? Interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Also, Ela in the chat, he says it's a neat trick to dismiss everything I've said, but it's just that. That's a qualitative claim that I ought not do that, or that what I said ought not persuade you, as opposed to something else that might be persuasive. It's not a neat trick. Truth is prescriptive. To make an evaluative claim of what I am saying is to say it is insufficient to change your mind, which would mean that either nothing is insufficient to change anybody's mind, or everything is sufficient, or some things are sufficient in order to be necessary to change one's mind. So everything you say is dependent upon truth and reality itself being descriptive. If you're saying what I'm telling you is insufficient, then you're making a statement about the sufficiency of truth to prescribe what we ought to believe and what we ought to reject.
Is he saying truth claims aren't prescriptive?
I am saying, is he saying truth claims aren't prescriptive? He is not engaging with that or dismissing it. I can't quite tell. I don't want to straw man him.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't think they have any standard of truth in place, is what it is. They're just trying to say things and get you to answer.
Can I tack one on while you're talking?
But yeah, absolutely. If you're saying it's a malformed question and he won't let you point that out, or loaded question, why? Obviously, if you want to know the truth, say, oh, okay, well, why do you think that's the case? He won't even entertain that, because I think that he knows that you're confident enough to absolutely point that
out. Because his whole, his whole argument is an equivocation. That's why he won't. Because he needs the equivocation for his reasoning to work, so he won't let him point it out.
Later on, he says, I've been doing this for 25 years, which is an implied black swan fallacy that every Christian is the same and nobody ever is going to bring him a challenge that he hasn't heard before.
Well, yeah, that's another credential claim too. Like, wow, 25 years, and how long you've been using loaded questions? You can pull back all the errors he's made.
I think
25 years.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I think it's fair. He probably has heard just about every challenge. He ignores them. I think there's some delay with this.
Would any punishment be meted out other than David? He's punishing David. Why was somebody else punished?
It'll be the same. Proxy? It'll be the same answer, because God gets to do whatever he wants.
Okay. All right.
So, Patrick, I've unmuted you. Do you have a moral objection to God using rape as punishment?
Oh, no. No, because and he can do whatever he wants, not humans.
Yeah, Patrick.
It's not equivalent.
You act like I wasn't aware that that's what you were trying to say the whole time. I don't know why you wouldn't just give the answer. And the answer is that Patrick has no objection.
Lazy question.
I'm sorry. I don't know why you're fucking opening your fucking mouth. Shut your pie hole. The fact of the matter is, Patrick has just acknowledged that he has no moral objection to God using rape as punishment, even though God had other options. And he believes this because he thinks God is true And so, for clarity, Patrick, does that mean that God has no moral judgment upon his actions because he is morality?
God is morality, sure, but that does not entail that we get.
Oh, no, that was it. You don't get to do a but and can.
Really? How does he have all these rules established that he's bringing in right now? That's what I'm wondering. About you can't have a creator-creature distinction. How does he know that? Any idea?
Continue.
He knows it
I'm going to
because
bat you around like a little fucking chew.
Wait. Okay, check the irony of that. Check the irony of that. He's using his power differential to humiliate somebody who he sees as inferior in a given context. Like he is a superior because it's his domain, so he gets to do what he does, and then he blames God for doing what he does in his domain. Like the performative contradiction, the irony is so deep.
Yeah, good point.
I'm gonna bat you around because it's amazing. Right after he says everything he says, he just starts to have this God complex immediately.
And then
it's amazing.
He's going to complain about power dynamics and oppressive and how the LGBT is oppressed and that's bad while he oppresses Christians.
Right. Now, also, if he's going to say that, well, he can't really make the claim that you can't have a view or a belief such as a creator-creature distinction, per Romans 1 and so forth. That's one thing. But the other thing is, like, it gets interesting here is like, well, because you're critiquing a biblical worldview, you're pointing out that I'm in contradiction, or I'm saying that God is allowed to do things that are immoral. Interestingly enough, Matt, if I take on your worldview, if I borrow from your worldview, I'd be better off because then there's really no objective or absolute ought in existence. So that slides me towards your worldview, in fact. It just becomes like an interesting experiment to point out how they're trying to say, well, come over to my worldview where we can't make any distinctions or we can't distinguish good from bad. And that's the way out of the problem. But they're not seeing how it's just a deeper muddle.
But
there's no foundation. Yeah, go ahead.
He thinks like his preferences and opinions are binding on other people. That's the problem with these people. They literally think their opinions like are important and matter, like objective facts. They treat opinions like objective facts. It's crazy.
Yeah. But when asked, he admits it's just a preference.
Yeah, but he'll treat the preference as if it's a state of affairs. It's like everyone. Yeah.
So you got to point out that smuggle, essentially, and how he's getting emphatic or emotional in speech. He doesn't strengthen the fact that all he has is a preference by his own account.
Toy, and I'm going to make $1 million off of your clip, because Patrick is basically saying he knows that the God of the Bible, who we have no reason to think exists, Patrick has not made any demonstration that God is truth. Patrick has not made any demonstration that God is moral, or what.
The mute button would have something to do with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's already said that all these things he's claiming are very negative about your character are not a problem. They're just,
of course, he said that from the gate.
Yeah. So it's like, what are you doing here, Matt?
He's saying that you can't demonstrate all these things that you're claiming, but he's claiming that demonstration is possible without the Bible. I would like to see him demonstrate that.
Right. I should probably make a video where I just caption over the entire video, spot a moment that isn't ironic, and then just play the exchange from the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And also, like, if we can do like a counter with like a little bell, like the smuggles of the oughts after saying there is no ought, or like PMars was pointing out, using it as an objective truth and it's only a preference. Give like a little counter, because these things, there's so many things that are slipping by here constantly, which is the irony that it needs to be like 5 minutes can turn into like an hour long if you really dissect it and decipher it. Because he's already negated himself out the gate, no matter what he does here.
Have like an objective moral claim counter, and that'd be funny.
Yeah, like you could write like assumed objective moral. It's just, man.
Morality is. But Patrick is completely convinced that because in his view, God can do no wrong, which is the question he should have answered earlier. Can God only do good? Yes, because God, by definition, is truth. God, by definition, is
Can you pause that?
morality,
Can you pause
which
that?
means
Let me explain why I didn't engage your question on the dumbed down level that it was delivered to me. Because to conflate can God only do right, and then to pair it up with God decreed that wrong should happen because of a punishment, that is not an endorsement of the free will sin that the people committed, even if it was culturally accepted at that time or culturally common at the time. So you were trying to get me to conflate, and the answer yes would have smuggled that in for you, and I'm not going to do that for you because I know what you're doing. And so I refuse, and I will take the quote unquote shame of not taking your frame job that you're trying to deliver to me by just maintaining that there's a difference that you are not admitting to.
So like, are you saying just because God does something in a specific instance doesn't mean that's universally good for humans to do the same thing? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that God has universal license to deal with his creation however he likes, but he also has license to prescribe for us our parameters for our behavior, which would not be equivalent to each other. So, for example, we are slaves of Christ, pretty much in every sense of the word, but we cannot enslave each other. Now, if you some people bite the bullet. Some people bite the bullet. Hold on, real quick. Some people bite the bullet and say, "Well, slavery was justified in this and that." I would just say check out my debate on slavery I had on Speakeasy. I think I make a pretty good case that even in the Old Testament, it was tolerated but not moral, like divorce. But go ahead.
I wouldn't even say that. I think in the Old Testament it's forbidden. But so
not morally tolerated, but civil law.
Well, like what's in the Old Testament, I wouldn't call slavery because no one's forced to do anything against their will. There's no one forced into captivity or forced into labor. It's all their choice. They could just leave. So
I mean, what about Deuteronomy 20, where first you come to a civilization, then you give up.
That's like war. That's like putting a sanction on Iran so they can't attack other people.
Well, that'd be against their will, but I think it would be in the sense of like, yes, that's war. It's a government action that there would be, but I would be careful about saying anything like nothing against their will, because I'm sure runaway slaves had to serve your full 6 year sentence.
There's a law that says if you run away, that you're not to return the slave to the master. So you could just.
I think that's for.
People didn't want. You got to understand. People wanted to be slaves because it was worse. Remember the prodigal son? He's like, I'd be better off being a slave for my father than where I am now, right?
Yeah, I'd have to look more into that. I remember that being for foreign slaves, that they could come and they could be anywhere, but I remember there was a reason I didn't use that argument, but go ahead.
I mean, I just look at what the Bible, like Hagar is an Egyptian slave to Abraham and Sarah. She's never forced to do anything. In fact, she leaves. So.
Yeah, I might have to revisit that, but
although she sure. Because Sarah was like mad. Sarah wanted her to leave, but. Anyways.
So what do we have here? Like Matt's trying to reverse this, right? He's trying to make you look immoral ultimately. Like
he's conflating what God does with being under a moral law, and therefore, if God decrees that a bad thing is going to happen, God is just as culpable as the people who free will chose to sin.
Yeah, even in more simplistic philosophical framework, he said it out the gate, like, okay, what I say are oughts and shoulds, or moral imperatives, quote, are just preferences, or just my feelings ultimately. So no matter what he does in this conversation, right? He's trying to flip it around, but after he makes that move, when you go back to it, you say, well, even if you have established a point, and I agree with it on a superficial level, when we go to the deeper point, which you rest on preferences and feelings, you have no actual point.
Well, he doesn't understand that like God and man, he's trying to put God and man in the same category, and that like laws apply both equally.
Well, sure, but I'm saying he can't even make any substantial ethical ought. He
Well,
can't
yeah,
even bring that to the table. So, like, even if it appears that he's done that, how does he finish this conversation?
but his whole argument is confusing, like the fact that because God would be a different category, the different laws or whatever would apply to God than humans. Like a police officer, like a police officer can pull you over because he has that authority.
Okay, well, he's going to say it's a special plead. So you're going to ask him, okay, that seems like a logical fallacy, right?
You can't. I mean, God's in a different category than humans, so it's not special pleading. Like it's not special pleading that cops can pull me over because they're in the category of like law enforcement, then they have that authority. Whereas like I'm not law enforcement, so I can't pull people over.
That's the analogy I used in my review of this, where it was like, hey, I think C.S. Lewis actually used this. The cop can run a red light, but I can't.
Yeah, even I agree with you guys. He doesn't understand the category, the creator distinction. But aside from that, I'm pointing out something else here. How does he finish the conversation aside from the superficial agreement you give him? Like, okay, we can agree that seems like a contradiction, but Matt, what I want you to do is bring home how from your worldview, contradictions and believing contradictions is something I ought not to do.
And the only thing he can do is grandstand, like is what he's doing here. Moral grandstanding, grievances, pounding the table. When you can't pound the facts and you can't pound the law, you pound the table, and this is what he's doing.
Well, to have a contradiction, you're going to need something that would limit reality, because if there's no limitation to reality, then an object could have like properties that contradict. There'd be nothing to limit it to not. So, like he assumes that there's this limit to reality, which we're identifying. Well, God is the limiter, but he wants to say, well, I'm going to reject the limit. You're a limiter, but I'm not going to offer any replacement. But I'm going to still act like there is this limit.
Yes. And then I'm going to adhere a moral property to it that says you ought not to engage in contradictory things on top of it. So there's no explanation for the metaphysic, obviously no epistemic justification, and a subjective moral. That's the overall point, no matter what he does.
And usually he would say we have no evidence to suggest otherwise, that a contradiction cannot be. All the evidence we've seen accumulates to the preponderance that we don't have contradictions cannot be resolved in themselves. But then that begs the question of, okay, so reality is prescriptive to our thoughts?
Yeah, it seems like he's crossing a category there as well. Like he's assuming this invariant immaterial reality exists, that being logical contradictions, but he can't really account for it. It's just on and on and on, really. It depends on how you want to play it.
Well, he's talking.
You guys need to go more into the Bible than I would.
He had that conversation with Jay Dyer. Like Jay Dyer explained all this to him. He doesn't care.
I remain not listening.
Yeah. You mean the conversation where he pointed out that he was arbitrary with it just is, as far as presupposing logic?
Like, I mean, Jay Dyer just routed skepticism. He's like, you have to believe the Bible to even be a skeptic. Like, what are you doing?
Each moment to the next would be challengeable from a skeptical perspective, because you're assuming induction and relying on the past.
Because he's going to claim, like, I need evidence. I'm a skeptic. I only believe things with evidence. But then it's like he clearly believes a lot of things with no evidence.
Well, that's right. He throws out all transcendental categories to make that claim. Or he assumes all the transcendental categories, which within the assumption, there's no demonstration or evidence for those things: cause, meaning, value, purpose.
When you point this out to him, he just doesn't care. So
you have to stay there with him. And
he makes money on doing this. What is he going to do? Admit you're right?
No, that's his entire identity. That's his entire career. He's not going to be bagging your groceries anytime soon. He's just going to stick to what he has motivated reasoning and audience capture. There's no way, like, unless God works in such a way in his life, which we can pray towards, but he's just in rebellion.
Isn't there a way to present these ideas up front, though? Like, okay, we're going to engage. Like, when you get on the show, you're like, well, we're about to engage, but you're saying you don't have epistemic justification for any claims, and and that any oughts or shoulds that are implied are going to be subjective. So no matter where we go in this conversation, isn't it always going to be challengeable? On top of that, you claim to be a skeptic, so of course it's challengeable. Like whenever you get to the end of your point, how is any of it going to be relevant in the fact that you can't fall back on anything true or real or consistent or binding?
Remember he said, I'm going to take this clip and I'm going to make $1 million off it. Like, you could have totally fried his ass on the motivated reasoning right there.
That's true. That's true. But then that would require me to not account for the message I want to get out versus like a personal indictment of his motives, which is less universal than the claims I want to get out there in my limited time on his show. So you're probably right.
I'm not suggesting that you should have done that. I was just pointing out that that would have been an opportunity to kind of like throw in some rhetoric there and fry his ass.
True. Maybe I'm too much of a robot, and I was focusing on the chessboard rather than the performance art that he's trying to pull off here. And to address Elonia, it's also a full-time job creating these shows, so creating entertaining content is high on their priority. So what you're calling moral grandstanding is partly for viewers. Would you also say that about a faith healer scammer who's just making money? Well, that's just the way it is, you know? Okay, the question is this honest? Is this truth? It is a show that's supposed to be based on truth and fighting lies. So I point out the irony that it requires moral epistemic odds tied together in order to make sense of the show itself. And he denies the basis by which his show must run on day to day and the outrage that his audience is going to have on top of that.
It's motivated reason. Dude, if he becomes a Christian, he has a whole crew. They all lose their jobs, dude, and they have families to feed.
I agree. And the same thing. And the same thing if a faith healer becomes an atheist. So what's the point?
Have you ever asked somebody like Dillahunty, like, what does a defeat for you look like? Like, can you recall a time when you had to reassess like a fundamental pillar of philosophy? For instance, your epistemology, your ethics, when you engage with a Christian? Because it seems to me that you don't even know what a possible loss could look like. It's not even something that's on your map of reality.
Well, he like can't be a Christian. He's enslaved to this is who he is, his identity. He can't. I don't see how he could change.
Well, but you've never asked somebody like that you're about to engage with, like, what would a loss look like? It's an interesting question because when two people engage, it has to be assumed that like they have something to lose, right?
Well, I would ask, like, when two people disagree, what would ultimately decide who's correct? What final authority decides who's right?
Yeah. And that gets to the tiebreaker that Reexam was touching on earlier too.
Because if you don't have that, then the debate is arbitrary. Like, think about the court system.
You've mentioned this too. Like, why not go into the discussion and say, did you want to have an arbitrary discussion or did you want to have something substantial? Like, if you ask that up front, it gets interesting because you know they're going to go into arbitrariness. So then you reflect them back to the agreement at the beginning.
Make them make a commitment to like not be arbitrary.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know. Make them make some commitment to in the debate, and then use that commitment. Like, hey, you're not honoring your commitment.
Yes, that's what I'm driving at. Exactly.
I will say to Elonia, one thing to keep in mind is the content creator fighting against something popular, right? So if they're fighting against something popular, they're not writing coattails in the sense, like I've been accused from this video of writing coattails, and I'm like, I am opposing both Andrew Wilson and Matt Dillahunty. So my potential audience is going to be much, much, much smaller than most people's.
Well, it's not a full-time job for you, so that's not the same as motivated reasoning. He's not.
It's true, but it's actually more of a time suck and a money hole for me, if anything.
Exactly. So,
Elonia, we've been pointing out this whole time, like, what makes you think that Patrick would even be under your subjective ethical system or the reasoning entailed in that? Are you able to answer something like that? That's sort of the body of what we're discussing today. Like, why do you have any oughts for anybody on the panel? Where are they derived from? What is the authority behind them? Those are the questions we're asking. It's the same questions to Dillahunty.
I mean, I think
just like them, you just want to keep talking without addressing this.
Yeah, and also to steal PMars's point, I don't think he literally meant that Matt can't be a Christian. Like, it's impossible for God to do that. What he means is Matt doesn't have the intellectual honesty to allow himself to seriously consider Christianity because
I'm saying he's got a lot of social pressure. There's like a lot of people depend on him. There's a lot of pressure on him to be what he is.
It wasn't a total definitive can't.
Yeah, hyperbole.
Yeah, he's got spiritual forces working against him, a lifestyle, 20 years of bad-mouthing Christianity that he would have to recant. He's got a lot of things working against him.
Wouldn't you think about if like you had a bunch of a company and a bunch of people work for you, and then you destroy your company? I mean, I'd feel like shit. You'd be fucking all these people over.
Well, yeah, you create a product with all the revenue and everything positive, and it doesn't work. You have to recall it.
That's his motivation. Like, he's like, I gotta take care of my friends. I gotta make money. I gotta, that's his motivation. What's our motivation? We're not making money. Our motivation is we want to save your life. We believe that you're going to die, and that the only thing that can save you is Jesus. That's all. That's our motivation.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of telling, in the conversation. Like, what's the motivation of these people?
Well, this is why they hide behind the convince me type of panels, like convince me God exists, because that puts them in a place where they can have a never-ending sort of goalpost where you could never really convince them. That's why you might ask them, like, how could you be convinced? How could you actually be convinced?
No,
because an answer sometimes.
You just have to change the goal. It's like the goal is not to convince you; it's to neutralize your objections. Because convincing doesn't happen from my mouth. Convincing is within you. That is a choice that you make.
Well, I would say because of Romans 1, they are already convinced. We have to tell them they're suppressing the truth of what they already believe.
Well, I agree, but they mean convince, and it's like make me say the words you want me to say. It's like I can't do that. You're not a puppet.
That's what they want. So they want to be. So when you have to explain yourself to someone else, the person you're explaining to is in a position of like explain yourself to me. Well, I'm your authority now. You see. So that's what they want. They want to be in this position of like everyone has to explain themselves to them, and they never have to explain themselves to anyone.
Yeah, and what is their marker for being convinced, right? They want the evidence and so forth. Hold on a second.
Yeah, so I would definitely agree that the one thing atheists don't want to talk about is atheism. Oh, and Elonia, yeah, I like engaging with the chat. I think one of the best and most fun things about YouTube is engagement with the people who are on panel with the chat, because chat doesn't. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, but that you say they don't want to talk about atheism, so that's been one of my strategies lately. It's like I'll just stop talking and I'll sit there in silence if I have to. I'll be like, you tell us, what do you got? What's the truth in your view? What's your way? What's your system that's better than Christianity? What do you got that's better? Go ahead. And they have nothing.
Correct. The explanatory power they need to pull you out of your belief system is lacking in their belief system.
Yes.
Like if you want to convince me something is wrong, and that the thing that is wrong is endorsed by my belief system, and therefore because my belief system endorses something that is wrong, I ought to leave my belief system. If your belief system denies the foundations of what could establish what's right or wrong, all you've done is brought me back to my belief system. It's just like a 360.
I was talking to this advanced philosopher type. I shouldn't even really say he's advanced. His name's like Jack Angstreich or what, and he was just like avoiding questions and wouldn't want to honestly engage in my argument. And so I was like, okay, you know what, Jack, you're right. Christianity, the Bible's false. You got me. You're right. Now I don't have a standard of truth, but I can't get out of bed in the morning without a standard of truth. So what do you have? What do you have? Can you give me a standard of truth so I can get out of bed tomorrow? Because you just destroyed my whole worldview, man. Wouldn't tell me anything. Wouldn't answer me.
Well, that's exactly what Andrew did with Matt Dillahunty. Fittingly enough.
Yeah, I heard you do that with those three atheists, PMars. I like that. The guy's like, well, you need to abandon that Jesus is the truth and just accept it. And you're like, okay, well, what do I do now? And he's like, I don't know.
Answer a fool according to his folly. So, okay, you're right, fool. Well, now what? And then they have nothing. Don't answer a fool according to his folly. Don't assume their foolish presuppositions and debate from a neutral position and do like intelligent design or, a fine-tuning argument or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's why I'm trying to hit on the
There is
conscience. Sorry, go ahead. Keep playing. Yeah.
All right.
no moral assessment on our part that we can attribute to God. That's what Patrick's view is. Patrick is a mindless robotic slave.
Did he just admit that he was batting around a slave?
Plaything of God, and so was David, and so was David's wives.
Says what?
I said, did he just admit that he was batting around a slave live on his show?
Yeah.
Patrick is fine with God using rape as punishment and using rape as punishment.
Oh my God.
When it's not even directed at the person.
Now, if we just had a way to prove that there's an objective problem with this, we might actually have a point. But instead, we're going to make emotionally emphatic face expressions and mute him while I continue to talk about it.
He's trying to punish. Patrick called in to explain that the Christian God is the best description of morality and to object to the moral systems that the rest of us would advocate for. And in doing so, he has made an embarrassing show of his own view on morality, that he is unwilling and unable to actually use his mind and his heart and his empathy and his compassion to understand that nobody, no being, no agent, even a God, could be viewed as morally correct in raping someone as a punishment.
This is when you do like the emotional music that Jim Bob does, because he's just going on an emotional tirade. It's not justified.
And you know what else? Patrick, he said we shouldn't do transgender surgery on a 6-year-old. What a monster!
I remain unembarrassed.
Yeah.
Especially for something somebody else did. But Patrick wants to spin. And because Seth asked, and because I'm amused, and because I've already got the clip I got out of Patrick, I'm going to unmute you in a second, and you're going to get to do your best for 60 seconds. I'm starting a timer. I'm going to give you a full 60 seconds to do your best to explain to everybody who's going to watch this clip exactly
2 minutes, come on.
Why it's okay for God to have people raped. 60 seconds starts now.
So as you can see, we ought to follow that which is true, and we ought to deny that which is false, because truth is prescriptive. It's from the beginning to the end. This has been an entire performative contradiction. If you want to talk about primary and secondary causations, you can look at Revelation 13:8, where Christ himself was slayed from the foundation of the world. Thereby, by definition, every atrocity, everything was deemed to happen by God, including the flood, including war, including slaughter, including rape, all those sorts of things. And to say that that makes him a bad God is to beg the question of by what standard, which every atheist has to do from the very beginning. They have to value map all of these things, which they can't actually attribute to, because they can't find a tiebreaker between any dilemma or any comparison of any good or the contrary of any good in any sense whatsoever. So all of these objections, which don't parse between secondary and primary causation, also have a problem of saying, well, I didn't do it. The Big Bang did it. I didn't do it. Physics did it. I didn't do it. Evolution did it. They can just kick the can down the road and make nonsense out of primary and secondary causation. Now, if you look this up, God deems what's going to happen, but he uses the free will choices of his creatures in order to ordain those things. And we have the same problem with atheism, because if we believe we're accountable, like I'm accountable for my words and actions, then therefore I can't blame evolution, because even though I'm just a product of matter and motion, I still have responsibility somehow. I still have justice. I still have actual.
Stop it there. This is a really good point. I brought this up too. It's like, to be responsible, you need something to be responsible to. To be accountable, there's something you need to be accountable to. And then what is the final thing that you're responsible or accountable to? We have God.
Rocks.
Yeah, they have themselves. But how can you be accountable to yourself? Because we can always we know that I know I do. If I try to hold myself accountable, I'll come up with an excuse, right? Oh, I'm tired, so I don't have to do this thing or something, right?
Well, you have an oscillating standard. You can always change it.
You can't really hold yourself accountable. I think that's bullshit. So like they have no final thing to hold them accountable on, so they can't even be responsible. They can't be responsible.
And yet they want to make God responsible to a thing that who can't be accountable to anything else. And yet they don't see, like they will probably even admit the circularity of self-responsibility as a contingent being, but they don't admit the completeness of not, being the ruler of the universe by being non-contingent and necessary. It's a double standard. They just flip it all around.
You mean they're making themselves the center of the universe, but they can't account for that being true in reality? Is that another way?
Yeah, so they will justify the autonomy of contingent beings, and they will try to take away the justification of the free will choices of God. Like they'll have it both ways, in the wrong order, in the exact wrong order.
Man. No, your 60 seconds here is good though. I mean,
I thought so.
You said some devastating things that they could pick up on.
Did he give you more than 60?
I think you just about hit the punch. So, but I think I summed up the problem pretty well. Actually.
Yeah, you're pointing out the evolution in physics. It's just there's no standard. It's just beings that are just acting out.
It's just you had to like spew it out so fast because you just like when you're like the Micro Machines guy.
Well, I mean, it was like 60 seconds. I better load.
I know, but that's his fault. That's not your fault. So yeah.
Yeah. But I can't think of a single weak point of what I said.
No, that was a good summary.
Thank you.
Guilt. None of this makes sense.
Okay. I gave you actually a minute.
I was counting the non sequiturs, but real fast, Matt.
It's counting the non sequiturs. Huh?
He doesn't name any of them ever, by the way.
Right.
He just asserts them.
And non sequiturs are wrong because
non sequitur only makes sense if truth is prescriptive to our thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So he was, yeah, right. When you say stuff like I was counting non sequiturs. It's like, give me one. No, I was too busy counting. Like what?
I'm sorry. Free will. He just throws free will in there. And it's like we had a whole different conversation for about 4 seconds. Like, well, we're not talking about free will, right? I mean, that's a different conversation.
If there's no free will, there's no morality. There's no choice. The fuck?
You can't be responsible for the words you're saying. The argument.
He's saying like, in your view, I just evolved to like grape this woman, so there's nothing wrong with it. It's just Big Bang caused it,
If this really is peak atheism, I don't know what they had left, because they've had decades riding off the coattails of the Four Horsemen, and we've gotten this far, and it just takes one simple observation to undercut everything they ever could say. I mean, yeah, we did it with tag, but we can do it with the necessary ethics of debate too. Like debate itself is prescriptive to our thoughts because we have to be honest in debate. You know what?
That's what tag is doing. Tag is an argument about arguments, so that's essentially the same thing as tag. But yeah.
Yeah, this tag hits more upon epistemology and
tag can be epistemic, ethical, or ontological, but epistemic is just the most popular form of it. That doesn't mean it's like it doesn't have to be like that,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You can focus on any of the domains and how you word the argument. So that's what needs to happen then, is that like a couple of fellows like yourself and me needs to critique what's called the best of the best, and maybe with some editing software start counting the logical fallacies, put a counter in there, point out how many times they keep resorting back to negating themselves like Matt did. at the beginning here. He said he doesn't have justification. He only has subjective ethic. But then he went on and proved his great point in his $1 million clip, which is just his preference. It's just a matter of, it's like Sci 10 Bruggencate style, right? Having to re-point out, how do you know? How do you know? Why ought I? Why ought I?
I think
Over and over again.
Patrick made a great point about like the epistemic thing isn't like they're just going to dismiss it. They're going to be like, yeah, well, I can know knowledge. I don't care about giving an account for it. And that's why Darth goes, like Jay Dyer goes the epistemic route, and that's probably why it's the most popular. But like Darth will go the ontological route, or like Patrick, he says he likes to go the ethical route. So I think, yeah, the ethical and ontological routes are like better than going the epistemic route. I mean, it's good to have all three at your disposal, I guess, but
Yeah. I think the I don't know always comes into play because ultimately, with lack of justification, like they can make the most damaging point towards you, and you can.
they'll do like the two quote quay. They'll be like, "Well, you don't know either. None of us know," or something.
Yeah. How do you know that?
How do I don't know? Yeah.
It's just it's
You
a
don't know what's in
vicious
my mind.
regress.
You know.
Yeah, it works either way. But I think it's a matter of just continually pointing it out. Because people could watch this, let's say, and go, oh, and then they just forget. They forget how damaging it is.
Is he gonna like kick you pretty soon here?
Yeah, this is towards the end, and they just act as if I gave them shell shock for the rest of it. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he actually said the things that he said that were logically entailed from the Bible. It's like I've never heard this before. It's like, well, because most people who are Christians call into your show, they haven't thought this through, and so your entire cash flow is people who haven't thought these things through. I wonder. It's also so similar to the red pill shows where they get a bunch of women who have just they have OnlyFans accounts and they don't have thoughts, and so they come in, and then these men just unfairly demolish people, and that for their ritual humiliation to make money. And these guys aren't doing anything too dissimilar, except that we don't have to look at anybody's lack of clothing, but they're taking religious people who don't know how to debate and then saying, look, isn't it? It's like if I went and I arm wrestled a bunch of kindergartners and I said, look at me, it's like, what are you doing, dude? But they're not. The funny thing is, the way I opened, it was more on a level that I think Matt would have appreciated intellectually, but it was going to have a hard time challenging intellectually. So he had to switch to the grandstanding, which I think would have been more fun to have talked about ethics and how it relates to epistemology.
He always grandstands.
Anyway, I'll stop talking now.
I think you gotta ask these guys like what's on the table, like what skin is in the game, because they're coming in here with like no fear of losing anything. Like I couldn't possibly lose. Like the Christian is automatically wrong and there's nothing for me to ever lose. That's kind of their attitude, right?
You know how many soccer moms he's defeated in a debate, dude?
Yeah.
He's debated every soccer mom, so undefeated.
Yeah.
Free will, right? I mean, that's a different conversation, is it not?
Yes. I gave you an extra 30 seconds. I gave you an extra 30 seconds because I already knew where you're going. I've done this for 20 fucking years, and it's embarrassing. Patrick's problem is that he doesn't see any possible solution to where do we get an absolute objective moral standard from, and thinks that makes truth and false equal. There's no tiebreaker for these things, which is ridiculously stupid, as I demonstrated at the beginning of the call.
So what's the tiebreaker here?
He didn't demonstrate that it's stupid. He just asserted it was stupid.
I stipulated it.
Yeah, he didn't demonstrate it. Dang. That's the problem, is he's not even following his own line of...
Yeah, well, my opponent's wrong, guys, because I said he's wrong, and he can't make an argument because I said so. And atheism, give me money.
But even if there was no solution, even if moral realism isn't true, I'd rather have situational ethics that are based on empathy and freedom and good senses of justice that are
just smuggling in more stuff to make a preference claim. It's so dumb. Even if this isn't true, I haven't defined what is and isn't true. I would prefer to have this senses of justice, things that require truth to even make the claim about. He just doesn't. He just keeps going.
They need to smuggle in the hair club for men.
Yeah. Well,
that are wise than to give up all moral
wisdom, justice, truth. These are all things he hasn't established, but he appeals to in emotional rhetoric at the end. It's so dishonest on such a deep level. He doesn't even see it.
Which is ridiculously stupid, as I demonstrated at the beginning of the call. But even if there was no solution, even if moral realism isn't true, I'd rather have situational ethics that are based on empathy and freedom and good senses of justice that are wise than to give up all moral sense to a storybook that you cannot demonstrate as true, that would force me to embarrassingly make excuses for rape the way you just did. I am morally superior to you. I am morally superior to...
Really? So he's going to demonstrate that? Or did he just do that with rhetoric? How does he think this is getting by?
I'm not just going to give up all my moral sense, like a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. That's obviously true. I'm not going to give that up and just believe in something I can't prove.
Yeah, it's like he just has like 100,000 subscribers that are going to buy this. It doesn't need to make sense, and that's good enough for him. He's morally superior to Patrick.
No, but what he's saying, like he's morally, dude, he's married to like a transgender person. Like he's not morally superior. Like
he can't even make sense of what moral superiority is, dude. And I know that you know that. It's just you have to keep repeating this for people that listen to him.
Well, like think about like it's vertical versus horizontal. So like I say, like if I compare myself to other human beings, well, of course I can look good because there's like murderers and stuff, right? Like obviously I'm not as bad as a murderer or something, but so it's easy to be good if we compare ourselves to other people. But then if you compare yourself like vertically, well, how do you be as good as Jesus? Like no one can meet that standard. So that's like difficult. Like it's easy to do what Matt's doing and be like, yeah, I'm better than another human being. Well, yeah, humans are.
Well, sure, but he still can't establish what better than is. It's just an agreement of his peers, right?
He has to use other people to compare himself. So he just.
Well, I'm saying even within the comparison, like if the world agrees that the rapists are more moral, or the people that Matt is trying to appeal to think that rape is moral, how does he actually argue that? What is he standing on?
To the God of your book. I am morally superior to pretty much everything that you said, and I'm not even that good. I'm just pretty good. And you're shit. Bye.
I did find it, in a twisted way, impressive. The sort of the vomitus apologeticus. Was he reading? He literally, I don't think he drew breath for 80 seconds.
I don't know what.
Like he's saying it's reading. Was he reading? That's a pejorative. Think about how insane that is.
He said what?
He goes, what was this guy reading? Oh, they read? Like, think about that. You're being mocked for reading.
Yeah, like if you have a script, you come to a debate with a
Yeah,
script.
but these people don't read. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
it's dumb to
A little
read.
behind the scenes, I wasn't reading. I mean,
Well-
I did have some notes in front of me at one point, but I was so focused on what was going on in the show, I wasn't even looking at my screen. I was just like dead focused on listening to what they had to say, and it wasn't easy to get the audio feedback through the phone, which is why it looked like I was interrupting just like rudely out of place. It's not like this audio is better for talking to people than the audio through the telephone that you get to hear in the show.
You know, Matt said he's superior, he's better than, he's more good, all those terms that he used. This could only be the case if you guys had established an agreement on what is good and what is moral. That never happened in this conversation. He opened up the conversation admitting he has no standard, that it's just a preference, and then moved on to make the point of superiority. Do you realize?
Bang. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Nemesis says, have you ever had a conversation with Aaron Ra? I would rank Matt Dillahunty a few notches above Aaron Ra in terms of his understanding. I've seen Aaron Ra, and I'm just not interested.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You'd be going backwards with him. But he does have like 300,000 subscribers, so there's a lot of people that you could potentially speak to there.
I guess, but does he have more than Matt then? Is that where
Yeah,
we're
I
at?
think he actually does, interestingly enough.
That's so weird. Like if I was an atheist, I would definitely give more credence to Matt Dillahunty than Aaron Ra.
I think it's the evolutionary perspective, though. Like from Aaron Ra, he does, he can spin a yarn and go on for a while about evolution. But
The world judges by numbers. God doesn't judge by numbers. Like that's actually explicit in the Old Testament, where like he gets mad at is it David for counting the numbers of chariots or something like that? Because he wants you to God wants you to have faith in him to win your battle, not faith in like, oh, I have a bunch of horses and chariots, so I'll win, right? Because of this number. See what I'm saying?
Not quality, not quantity.
In modern day, it's like, yeah, because people just like are obsessed with what we can quantify. And so you get judged on social media like, well, if I have a bigger number next to the followers or subscribers, and like my opinion means more, I'm more valid and all. We gotta not think like that.
I called in the show not because I thought that I was like smarter than Matt, but because I'm at the point where I'm like, I need more intense tests for my line of argumentation with the moral, the ethical angle. And I was like, okay, we need to test this a little harder. So I tried it on Matt. And I guess I wasn't surprised that he didn't have an answer. I guess part of me was also suspecting or expecting that there was going to be more. And I got no better an answer out of him than I would have like your average off the street atheist. It's all the same answer.
Yes. And that's why it's great that you did that. You went in there and you come out realizing it's all the same. They've just homogenized what they're calling ethics. They have nothing. So what now? What now?
That's literally what I entitled the tweet or the X post that I put this on. Is like, so what now?
Nice.
I literally said that. I don't know. It's like, this should be the episode if anybody is keeping score.
Yeah.
That would draw an end to the show. It's kind of like you have. It's kind of like if you had a movie about like Rocky, and then the first punch in the movie kills Rocky, and there's like 90 more minutes to go. Like, why are people staying in the theater?
Yeah. Well, I think what it shows us is that the little debates and interactions, it's got to go beyond that, or it's got to go underneath it, similar to the method itself, the presuppositional method. It goes more to the critique and the analyzing re-examination, if you will, in picking apart the components and showing exactly what this madness of a methodology that's being employed here is. It's incoherent babble. It's based on emotional rhetoric to grab attention, but it's lacking in actual philosophical substance. So it becomes a task of becoming like a teacher, is what it is. Or maybe a team of people that can point out and deconstruct this in a way that's favorable to an audience. Go ahead.
Well, I hate how like when we debate, I guess the audience evaluates the debate based on their worldview. So it's like they're just going to usually tend to, side with their worldview because that's how they evaluate. Whereas like in high school, I used to play like a real-time strategy game called StarCraft, Brood War, and it's like we would debate in the lunchroom, about strategies or like what's the best thing to do in the game. But then you could actually see who's correct because it's like, all right, fight me, right? And then if I win, then I'm right, and you could see who's right. Whereas like in debate, it's less objective, I guess, because it's all dependent. Because like what Tag says, we evaluate the winner of the debate through our worldview. So
yeah. Well, I think this is what YouTuber Light Before the Tunnel pointed out. He pops over here every now and then. He has some interesting perspectives on presuppositionalism, and he pointed out that it's not actually meant to be geared for debate. It's meant to be an instructive process. That because it's a meta level argument, it makes sense that a good presuppositionalist would be critiquing debates, right? Like sitting back and pointing out what's going on there. So I think that is actually where this would be leading me, to do more critiques than anything.
Oh, I'd love to debate you, but before we debate, we have to establish an absolute foundation so the debate isn't arbitrary. My absolute is Jesus. What's yours?
Yes,
But
and that usually stops.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Patrick, that would be cool for you to go over to Aces, but I don't think Patrick has interest in that. But
I'm just not interested. The guy seems like he's, not well, and I don't feel right going there for a multitude of, I guess, unexpressed reasons. It just seems like an unwell guy, and it feels like I would be talking to somebody who is so far away from like any kind of critical foundation, or that it would just be, I hate to say wasted effort, but some people are pretty far gone. And his worldview, from what you guys have told me about it, is so weird, so bizarre, that I'm just like, even if I lived next to this guy, like he was my neighbor, I'd probably say hi once in a while, but I probably overall avoid him, not because I don't care about his soul or his eternity, but there's some people you can pray for, and there's some people you can talk to, and some people you can't do both.
yeah, I can't argue with that assessment.
So what I do is like, if someone's arrogant, I think it's a waste of time. Or if like someone's humble, then you be really patient with them. Because Bruce Lee would do something similar. He would say like, because Bruce Lee is like the best martial artist, right? So people would come to him and be like, teach me your martial arts. But he would say, well, a lot of people would be arrogant, and they didn't really want to know his martial arts, and they just wanted to be like, I'm better than you and I know more than you, kind of an attitude. But why teach someone like that? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Right.
he had this analogy of like, he would fill up a glass of water and he'd be like, I can't add to your cup unless you empty it first. You can't take my knowledge until you let go of your knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point. In other news, Jay Dyer unblocked me on X, so I wonder what that's all about.
Gay liar.
Uh-oh.
He blocked me
Either
initially
of you guys,
I don't like Andrew Wilson and Jay Dyer as well.
yeah, but
right.
Jay Dyer is a wealth of knowledge.
He is, but so is Jim Bob, and Jim Bob's a avid anti-Semite.
Yeah, they're anti-Semites. Jim Bob doesn't. He speaks on stuff like his evolution arguments are really bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Wilson and Jim Bob are anywhere near the level of knowledge of Jay Dyer.
Dyer reads a lot, but I don't know.
They're all good at arguing, but I mean, Dyer is a level above. They'll say the same thing. I mean, he can basically argue anything.
PMars, real quick, give me your rundown evaluation of Jim Bob's evolution arguments, because I actually gave a super chat to his modern day debate argument on evolution this past weekend.
He basically says it's like an argument that I would hear in Flat Earth, where they would say he tries to limit the parameters of what is and isn't like science or a scientific experiment to like this narrow parameter, and just say like just deny the evidence and say it's not science because it's not his version of science or something.
Got it. Okay, so that also explains why he believes we didn't land on the moon.
Yeah, I think he used to hang out with flat earthers like Benjamin Owen. That's where he got his audience.
You guys don't find it suspicious that we didn't go back to the moon because we lost the plans?
I don't know. I don't think believing we didn't go to the moon, I don't have a problem with people who want to think that, but I know the evidence is pretty strong we did.
I'm pretty sure Russia would have jumped all over it if they could have, like immediately within the first decade that happened, but they didn't. And they themselves had plans to go to the moon, which tells me that they didn't think it was unfeasible. And so, if we have two opposing powers who don't think it's unfeasible and actually made a race about it, and then all it took was a studio, and they both knew that all it took was a studio, then why didn't the people who made Sputnik first also make the studio first?
So Jesse Lee Peterson asked Jay Dyer, "Do you think the Earth is flat?" And Jay Dyer said, "I don't know." And I hope he was joking.
I think he just didn't want to address it. I saw that.
Either that or he didn't want to talk to Jim Bob again about it or something.
Yeah. Did you say, do you know if Jay Dyer actually believes that, JG?
No, I don't know. I think he just didn't want to talk about it. I think he would.
I hope so.
Say it's
I hope he thinks the Earth is a sphere. Oh my gosh.
Well, that guy I referenced light before the tunnel, who's very dialed into presuppositionalism, very good understanding of it. You know, he's a flat earther. So I don't get into that with it because I don't want to
crazy
that to divide us. You know,
if you understand precept, you should understand that math has to map onto reality, and if math maps onto reality, then the Earth is definitely a sphere because we would use like there's like Euclidean geometry for like a flat surface, and then there's spherical geometry. And when we navigate the ocean, we use spherical geometry, right? So it's like everyone would get lost, you know? Everything would be different if we didn't know the shape. You couldn't navigate successfully. So it's just insane.
We'll also consider that like AM radio waves, that we're told that they go on in space forever and ever, right? But if that's true, we're on a plane, like a flat plane, then flatter areas like the Midwest, you should be able to hear Chicago AM radio stations out in Nebraska. But I don't think you can. I think that the curvature makes it so that you're not hearing that.
PMars, have you asked people or have you presented an argument? Because I know you do different things on your channel, random stuff. It seems like, have you just made the argument like the God is real because the Bible told me so? Have you ever played that?
I mean, basically, and then people can laugh at that, but I don't care if they laugh.
Yeah, because you know how to navigate that. They don't know how to argue that.
Yeah, I could even do like look at the trees, because the tree is a unified description of reality. So that would require something to unify it. God is the unifier. So if you deny God, what unifies the tree?
Yeah.
So they laugh at like look at the trees, but
well, I'm thinking that those type of arguments, they obviously get more attention, but I think they might speak to people more because people will hone in on that because it sounds so absurd. Like, why do we need Jesus for science? There.
Well, Bonson did that with the toothbrush. He goes, I can prove God exists with toothpaste.
Yeah, right. With the toothpaste, yeah. And induction, so forth. Yeah, I think that might be the way. But the debate platform, I think, is not as favorable as the critique platform, or just maybe what you're doing with some of the TikToks, like making a crazy sounding argument, but being able to back it up with substance. But
am I doing that on TikTok? What? Oh,
yeah, well, you do random stuff, like you'll go on TikTok and say, whatever you say, Jesus is real because I say so.
I tried to do the toothpaste argument on TikTok and everyone started laughing. And then they're like, I gotta hear this argument.
Yeah, you draw them in and you basically get them where you want them.
What's the toothpaste argument?
It has to do with induction, right? So like when you squeeze the toothpaste tube, you expect toothpaste to come out of the tube because the future resembles the past. But the future resembles the past has no justification outside of like God and the Bible telling us that he orders the world so the future does resemble the past. It's a big problem for secular philosophy. It's called the problem of induction.
Yep.
Yeah, David Hume would be the reference there, one of them, a main reference. But sure, yeah, you're assuming the past.
They'll always like to quote Quayle as they'll assume that those problems apply to us still. Like I haven't solved the problem of induction, but that's not true. I have an explanation. They just don't like the explanation. But it counts in philosophy as an explanation.
Right. And in order to not like it and reject it, you have to have a value system prior, which gives you the accommodation to do such a thing, which just leaves more room for the conversation you're trying to have. Why are you negating me? Why are you arguing with me in the first place? What do you have in place? Let's go ahead and grant that. Let's toss out Jesus. What do you have? It's really just the same conversation, in just different forms. Like you could break it down to who do you think you are? Who do you think you are, mister? Why do you think you have anything established in your worldview that can critique mine? Ultimately, that's all you're really asking them. It's like, who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are, Mr. Big Stuff?
Yeah, that song came to mind for me too. All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for reviewing the debate.
Thanks for coming by, man.
Whatever you want to call this debacle. But
if you're bored, I have a video where I call the atheist experience Austin. There's like 3 of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I thought it's a pretty funny video where I run. I guess I do the epistemic thing on them, but I think I did a pretty good job. If you want to, I think that's on my channel. If maybe you can find it.
I have subscribed to you, so maybe I can look over at that.
Yeah, it's funny calling into those people that they were acting like, I don't know. They act so immature.
Okay, I got a comment on the video. It says actions do not derive from someone's nature. Instead, someone's nature is defined by their actions. Can you, like, who's going to tell them that? Anyway, atheists love to comment on these things.
Yeah. Well, look,
go ahead.
I feel like I'm in good company with you two guys in particular. PMars has been coming over here a little bit, but the addition of you, Re-Exam, I think, quite honestly, is what I've been looking for. This is powerful. If you guys could show up, I'm limited to the daytime now. I can't do stuff at night where I used to. But if you guys show up when I'm doing critiques, much appreciated. I enjoy what you guys have to say. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the future, if possible.
Yeah, I can't guarantee regularity, but it's been fun, and I try and come in because even just listening to Bonson lectures is very good, even if I don't have anything. But we could definitely listen to PMars appearance, and then if you guys are interested, I did have a much more detailed mute button free back and forth with a very smart atheist who goes by Shiva online, and I got to run more of my arguments within my structure that I've been putting together recently with him.
Awesome.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll try to pop on during the day when I can and see if you guys are around. And
yeah, I know I had one video I've been meaning to review with you for a while. We should check where it's like with Jack Angstrike, I think, and Tom Rabbit, and they're talking to some priest up. I don't know who he is, but yeah, their objections are really dumb. I thought it'd be funny to make fun of them.
Yeah, we can definitely check it out. So But thanks to both you guys, actually, because you guys actually get out there more than I do. And you guys are bringing a lot of source material back to critique.
I'm in
So
the trenches.
what's that?
Oh, I'm like right in the trenches on the spiritual war. Like every day, I throw on myself.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you guys for that. I'm gonna hop off here and look forward to seeing you guys again.
Okay,
Yeah.
man. Have a good
All
day.
you guys out there, don't forget to like and subscribe to Certainty Exists 888 and to PMars channel and to the Reexamination Show. We will see you next time.
Take care.